Hello there and welcome to Secretum Histories, where curiosity settles in beside the quiet of evening and even the coldest mysteries soften just enough to drift into the gentle rhythm of sleep. Tonight, we're going somewhere most people never see with their own eyes, a place wrapped in silence, buried in darkness for half the year, and layered beneath so much ice that even modern machines struggle to guess what waits below. This quiet corner of the world has inspired explorers, scholars, dreamers, skeptics, storytellers, and an entire constellation of theories that somehow managed to survive the pressure of miles of ice overhead. Antarctica sits at the bottom of our world like a sealed envelope, and for just a little while, we'll open it carefully and see what centuries of speculation have whispered about the frozen ground beneath it. Because tonight's journey follows an idea that has lingered for decades and refuses to melt away, no matter how many times the winds sweep across the white horizon. Some believe that before the ice arrived, before the world shifted, before human history began its first attempts to record itself, there might have been something built there, something older than any pyramid, something placed by hands that were not entirely human, something that could have been the first structure that Anunnaki left on Earth. Before we move into the deeper layers of the story, these late hours always feel a little calmer, when the space between us narrows just enough to feel shared, even across distance. So, as you settle in, wherever you happen to be listening from, and whatever the light looks like outside your window, let this quiet moment be a small anchor before we drift into the frozen south. If the stillness here helps you unwind, or if you enjoy wandering through science and history at a slower pace where each idea has a room to settle, I'd be grateful if you liked the video or subscribed. It keeps this peaceful little corner glowing softly, even when exploring places that are usually far too cold for comfort. Now, let's ease into the story without rushing. Antarctica often feels like a blank canvas, a white expanse where the world seems empty, but emptiness can be deceptive. When people imagine the South Pole, they tend to picture relentless winds, endless snow, and a landscape so quiet that you can hear your own heartbeat more clearly than usual. That quietness makes it easy to forget that Antarctica wasn't always this way. Long before the ice took hold, the continent rested much farther north. It once held rivers, forests, shorelines, and a climate that could support a wide variety of life. What we see now is the final stage of a long transformation. The continent beneath the ice has shifted, drifted, and frozen over in ways that feel unbelievable compared to the barren world it is today. And in that long timeline, with so much change and so much land hidden from every modern eye, it isn't difficult to understand why people look toward it when imagining what ancient civilizations might have left behind. Slow steps through this topic help the ideas settle naturally. Antarctica, as it stands now, is almost entirely inaccessible to the imagination at first glance. It appears too empty to be interesting, too cold to hold secrets, too remote to have played a role in early human history. Yet the moment someone mentions ancient structures, forgotten builders, or civilizations that predate anything in the archaeological record, Antarctica immediately becomes one of the only places that could hide something large enough, old enough, and undisturbed enough to withstand the erosion of time. Ice is heavy, but it's also protective. Anything trapped beneath it would remain untouched for thousands, possibly millions of years, shielded from wind, sun, storms, and wandering humans. In that sense, Antarctica isn't just a continent. It's a locked vault that no one can open yet. This idea alone has kept researchers, theorists, and writers returning to it over and over again. They consider the possibility that long before recorded history, before any known civilization built temples or monuments, before humans spread across continents, something else may have been there. Something that didn't come from familiar cultures or recognizable traditions. Something that appears in Mesopotamian legends as the Anunnaki, often described as visitors or beings with knowledge far beyond the earliest humans. Many of the theories that link the Anunnaki to Antarctica rely on one simple observation. If a civilization wanted to place something important somewhere untouched, somewhere no other human group would find easily, somewhere far from early settlements, the southern continent would have made an ideal location, especially if it looked nothing like the desolate place we know now. The landscape before glaciation would have been stable enough for structures. The shifting of continents would have placed that land in a more temperate zone. Dense vegetation and natural resources would have made it possible to build large foundations, and the long, slow arrival of ice would have preserved anything left behind with remarkable care. This slow, freezing process, unlike earthquakes or erosion, doesn't crush everything immediately. It layers over it, thickens, expands, and locks whatever is underneath into an icy sarcophagus that remains sealed for epochs. Some people view that process as a natural tomb for ancient structures. Others see it as the perfect explanation for why no traces of these civilizations appear elsewhere. The ice would have hidden everything so deeply that modern scanning technology still struggles to penetrate it fully. The belief that the Anunnaki may have left something in Antarctica doesn't begin with modern speculation. It originates from a combination of puzzling maps, unexpected geological findings, strange satellite images, and the long cultural memory embedded in myths that describe gods or beings descending from the sky. These pieces don't form a clear picture, but they create enough of a pattern that people continue to assemble them into possibilities. For example, some Renaissance maps appear to outline Antarctic coastlines as though the cartographers had access to ancient source material created before the ice formed. Geological research confirms that Antarctica once held vegetation and was connected to other land masses in ways that would have made early exploration or settlement far more feasible. And satellite images occasionally reveal angular shadows or geometric shapes beneath the ice that spark curiosity among those who study them. Moving slowly through these elements helps avoid jumping to conclusions too quickly. The story isn't just about structures that may or may not exist. It's about the long chain of observations that led people to wonder in the first place. The idea that Antarctica could hide the first Anunnaki structure on Earth doesn't rely on a single discovery. It comes from how these scattered details stack on top of one another, just like the layers of ice they describe. With each layer, the picture becomes slightly clearer, and even though none of the evidence is definitive, it keeps the theory alive. There's something calming about considering the possibility that our world still holds places untouched by our modern reach. Places where something unexpected could remain hidden, not out of mystery for mystery's sake, but simply because the forces of nature have outpaced our tools. Antarctica's ice is thick enough to bury mountains, lakes and ridges that scientists only discovered in recent decades. If a mountain range can remain completely unknown until airborne radar passes overhead, then the idea that a structure could be hidden beneath the ice doesn't feel impossible. The continent challenges assumptions not by revealing secrets, but by refusing to give them up. As the mind settles further into the pace of this nighttime exploration, the possibility of an ancient structure becomes less about proving or disproving a theory and more about understanding why such theories persist. Antarctica draws these ideas because it is one of the last untouched regions of Earth. Every other continent has been mapped, excavated, explored, and studied to such depth that any large ancient structure would have been found long ago. But the southern continent holds its silence effortlessly. Nothing about it invites easy discovery. The distance, the cold, the harsh winds, the shifting ice, and the lack of permanent human settlement make it a place where imagination can wander, without constant interruption from modern tools or familiar explanations. This creates a unique environment for speculation. Unlike other mysteries where human contact has erased or altered the evidence, Antarctica's remoteness means that if something ancient is there, it could easily remain intact. It could sit a mile beneath the surface without a single trace reaching daylight. The ice could hold it in place the way amber holds an insect, preserving not only the structure, but also the intention behind it. and because the continent has been frozen for millions of years, anything beneath it predates all recorded civilizations. This timeline aligns neatly with myths that describe early visitors, early architects, or early influences that came to Earth long before humans were capable of building on a large scale. The Anunnaki in ancient texts are often associated with events that happened before humanity began shaping cities or countries. Their presence in those stories feels disconnected from the archaeological record, as though their footprints were left somewhere people have yet to look. If their first arrival took place somewhere remote and now buried, Antarctica becomes the most logical candidate. Moving through this gentle introduction, there's no need to insist on certainty or dismiss the idea outright. The aim here isn't to claim what must be true, but to examine why this theory has endured, why each small piece of evidence draws people back, and why the frozen continent at the bottom of our world continues to spark curiosity, even in the most skeptical minds. This landscape invites a slower kind of exploration, one that leaves space for possibility without demanding conclusion. As the thoughts drift across the ice-covered expanse, the story naturally continues toward the earliest whispers of this idea, the legends and historical references that first linked ancient beings to distant and untouched lands. And just like the ice layers that hold so much beneath them, the story will continue to build gently from here, moving into the deeper questions that surround the origins of the theory and the world that existed long before Antarctica became the frozen desert we see today. The idea that Antarctica could hold something built long before humans left their first traces in the archaeological record often begins not with ice or geology, but with stories. Long before radar scanned landscapes hidden beneath frozen sheets, long before explorers reached the southernmost horizon, long before modern theories tried to link ancient civilizations to forgotten continents, stories about the earliest ages of the world were already circulating. These stories came from cultures separated by oceans, mountains, and thousands of years of distance. Despite their differences, many of them carried a similar theme, one that described beings who arrived in the earliest eras of Earth's history and shaped more than one generation of humanity. The belief that the Anunnaki once interacted with early humans draws from these ancient narratives, and those narratives occasionally place these visitors not in the heart of known civilizations, but far from where people lived. Travelling back into these stories helps build an understanding of why some researchers and theorists believe the earliest structures linked to such beings would appear in places now considered remote. The texts from Mesopotamia describe the Anunnaki as older than the civilizations that recorded their names. They appear in lists that trace genealogies of gods and rulers across time spans that don't match any known dynastic periods. Their presence in these myths suggests involvement in events that predate the rise of cities. Some of these events would have taken place when humans lived nomadic lives or small communities that occupied limited regions. For a group described as ancient and influential, placing their earliest structures close to early humans would not have made sense. Building far from human settlements would have given them distance, privacy, and the ability to maintain control without constant human interference. This idea creates a bridge between the mythological positioning of the Anunnaki and the geographical isolation of Antarctica. The earlier stories do not describe these beings as seeking the warmth or convenience of populated lands. They are portrayed as arriving from elsewhere, moving across the earth in ways that suggest they were familiar with landscapes humans had not yet reached. Some scholars interpret these descriptions symbolically, while others consider the possibility that these narratives contain remnants of historical memory that became mythologized over generations. Either way, the stories consistently place the earliest activities of these beings in regions that are difficult to access. The placement of the Anunnaki in distant lands is reinforced by another feature present in many ancient texts. These beings appear to operate above human concerns, establishing structures and enclosures that were not intended for human habitation. The descriptions of their dwellings and meeting places emphasize scale and separation rather than integration. These structures were not depicted as cities, but as headquarters or stations with distinct purposes. Some of these descriptions refer to mountains, plateaus, or elevated regions that are not easily reached. The emphasis on locations that were difficult to approach aligns with the notion that their earlier structures would have been placed somewhere only they could access easily. Antarctica's current state makes it seem inhospitable, but the continent's past was far different. Before the ice accumulated, the land was open and fertile. Geological evidence shows forests, rivers and coastlines that could have supported large construction projects. This combination of accessibility in the ancient world and inaccessibility in the modern world gives Antarctica a unique profile that fits easily into the pattern left by these old stories. The earliest human communities would not have reached that region, and even if they had, they would not have possessed the tools or resources to understand or interact with any structures placed there. From the perspective of a civilization described as arriving from beyond, such conditions would have been ideal. The legends also provide hints about why the Anunnaki may have chosen distant or isolated regions. Some of the earliest myths describe disputes, alignments, responsibilities and rivalries among these beings. If these stories contain even a fragment of historical memory, then the need for remote locations might reflect an effort to establish boundaries or maintain control over certain activities. The placement of outposts or stations far from human presence could have allowed these beings to perform tasks or experiments without interruption. Over time, as the Earth changed and ice spread across the southern regions, any structure built there would have vanished beneath the accumulating layers, preserved by cold and pressure. The stories of the Anunnaki come from a region very far from Antarctica, yet they contain elements that resonate with the idea of distant lands. Many ancient cultures preserve stories of unknown territories located at the corners of the Earth. These corners were sometimes associated with gods, hidden realms, or events that occurred before the current shape of the world emerged. The idea of an edge or boundary appears frequently in these narratives. When explorers from Mesopotamia or surrounding cultures imagine distant lands, they often describe them as places where unusual things happened or where divine activity occurred. These impressions form a thread connecting the myths to the idea of the southern continent as a possible site for early activity. Another piece of this connection comes from the way the Anunnaki are described in relation to the natural environment. Their movements and actions in the stories are often connected to geological features rather than human settlements. They appear near mountains, deserts, rivers and oceans. The landscape itself plays a role in shaping their actions. For a civilization described as capable of influencing the Earth on a large scale, choosing a region that was geologically stable yet isolated would have allowed them to build structures that could withstand large shifts in climate or continental drift. Antarctica fits that description, given its geological stability and its isolation from human migration paths for most of history. The legends mention structures, but they describe them in ways that don't resemble the monumental architecture familiar from later civilizations. These early structures were portrayed as foundations or enclosures rather than temples or palaces. Their purposes were functional, tied to tasks that remain unclear. Some of these functions relate to governance, while others link to natural forces or resources. The ambiguity surrounding these structures arises from the symbolic language used in ancient texts, but the repeated emphasis on function over form suggests they were not built for worship or habitation. This raises the possibility that the earliest of these structures, if they existed, would not resemble anything easily recognizable as a human-made monument. This difficulty in identifying their appearance adds to the mystery surrounding any potential discovery beneath Antarctica. If a structure exists below the ice, it may not resemble anything familiar. It may not have sharp edges or ornate carvings that would identify it immediately as a cultural artifact. It might appear as an unusual formation or an unnatural geometric pattern, only detectable through advanced imaging. This aligns with occasional satellite readings or radar interpretations that hint at anomalies beneath the ice. anomalies that don't fit the surrounding terrain. The idea of a distant southern land connected to myths about the Anunnaki might seem unlikely at first glance, but the stories themselves encourage consideration of unusual possibilities. Legends often place the earliest events of Earth's history in unfamiliar locations, because those locations symbolize separation from the daily world. When myths describe beings arriving from beyond, they are often placed in locations that humans could not easily reach. This consistent narrative pattern suggests that if the earlier structures of such beings were placed somewhere, that somewhere would have been remote, stable, untouched, and separate from early human activity. Antarctica, before the ice, provides that scenario. The idea of a warm, green continent now buried beneath frozen layers aligns surprisingly well with myths that speak of forgotten ages when the world looked different. The landmass existed, accessible yet distant, stable yet evolving, a perfect candidate for early construction. And as the world changed, that land drifted southward, cooling gradually until its ancient appearance vanished completely beneath the ice. This gradual transformation would have preserved anything built on its surface, protecting it from human interference and natural erosion. The process of drifting and freezing gives these myths a sense of continuity. They describe events happening before humans understood geography, but those events could align with geological timelines. The earliest human records often compress vast periods of time into simplified stories. In these compressions, ancient structures or actions become symbols rather than descriptions. A structure built in a warm Antarctic landscape may become a distant dwelling placed at the edge of the world. A continent drifting out of reach may turn into a forbidden land where only gods once walked. These symbols reflect real processes filtered through ancient memory. In many Mesopotamian myths, the Anunnaki are portrayed as separating themselves from the world after a certain period. As human civilizations grew, these beings withdrew. Stories of their withdrawal describe them retreating to distant or hidden places, sometimes beneath mountains or across oceans. If the earlier structures they built were located in a region that later froze, then the myths describing their disappearance from the world could reflect the disappearance of their structures beneath ice that early civilizations could never penetrate. The legends don't need to describe Antarctica directly to imply such a location. They only need to describe distance, isolation, and loss, which they often do. Over centuries, scholars, explorers, and theorists continued to interpret these stories. Each era added its own perspective. Early historians treated the tales as symbolic. Later researchers looked for historical patterns. Modern theorists considered geological context. Through these shifts, one idea remained steady. The earliest actions of the Anunnaki occurred far from where the stories were written. This concept aligns easily with the idea that their first structures, if they existed, would not appear in the archaeological record of known civilizations. They would appear somewhere beyond human reach. As radar and satellite imaging advanced, the possibility that large geometric formations could exist beneath Antarctica gained more attention. Images showing unusual shapes sparked debates about what might lie below. Some researchers interpreted these shapes as natural formations. Others noted inconsistencies that suggested artificial origins. The ambiguity surrounding these findings mirrors the ambiguity surrounding the myths themselves. Both offer hints without conclusions, traces without answers, pieces that can be assembled in multiple ways. This uncertainty allows the story to move naturally into deeper exploration, not as an attempt to prove any single idea, but as a way of understanding how ancient stories, geological evidence, and modern technology overlap. The legends of the Anunnaki place their earliest activity at the edges of the world, because those edges symbolize distance, secrecy, and significance. Antarctica, in its ancient form, offers a physical location that matches these symbolic descriptions more closely than any other continent. Moving forward from these early whispers, the story begins to shift toward the world that existed before Antarctica froze. The land beneath the ice has its own tale, one that shaped the possibilities available to any civilization that might have lived there long before it became the coldest place on Earth. Long before Antarctica became the silent frozen world people now imagine, the continent existed in a completely different form that doesn't match the modern perception of endless snow. Understanding this older version of the land beneath the ice provides a foundation for the idea that something built there could still remain hidden in a way no other place on Earth could manage. When studying the geological history of the planet, scientists discovered that the southern continent didn't always rest at the pole. It shifted gradually over millions of years, carrying forests, river systems, and a landscape capable of supporting diverse life. This earlier version of Antarctica offers a practical stage where structures, settlements, or outposts could have existed, especially for any civilization that might have arrived during a warm, stable period. This warmer continent existed during several geological eras, each one shaping its environment differently. The most significant shifts happened when Antarctica was part of ancient supercontinents. During these periods, the land was positioned in warmer latitudes, surrounded by other land masses, and open to climates much gentler than the icy world known today. Evidence comes from fossils, sediment layers, mineral patterns, and the presence of types of rock that only form in specific conditions. These findings paint a picture of a continent marked by greenery and thriving ecosystems, rather than a barren sheet of ice. The geological record shows remains of ancient forests embedded deep within layers of rock, across regions now buried beneath ice miles thick. These forests included species that grew in temperate climates, meaning the land supported trees and plants that could survive seasonal sunlight rather than constant darkness or freezing temperatures. Fossilized ferns, preserved wood, and impressions of leaves all reflect an environment alive with vegetation. These clues create a striking contrast with the current cold environment. They also suggest that if structures were built there during that time, they would have stood among landscapes familiar to ecosystems found elsewhere on Earth today. The presence of rivers and lakes across prehistoric Antarctica is supported by sediment patterns that only form when water flows consistently across a surface. Layers of silt and shale point to slow-moving rivers, while certain mineral deposits indicate the presence of standing water. These bodies of water supported early species of fish and aquatic plants, some of which left behind fossils that survived through geological changes. This entire network of land and water shows that the continent once held conditions capable of sustaining a complex environment. A civilization, whether human or something older, would have found the region suitable for building stable structures. Scientists discovered evidence of volcanic activity across different parts of Antarctica as well. The volcanic islands and mountain ranges exposed today represent only the peaks of much larger systems beneath the ice. These ancient volcanoes released heat that affected nearby regions, warming pockets of the continent further. Combined with the natural warmth of lower latitudes during earlier eras, these heat sources contributed to an environment that remained viable for life even when global climates shifted. For a civilization capable of advanced engineering, volcanic heat sources could have provided energy or structural stability. This potential makes the continent even more plausible as a site for early construction. The movement of tectonic plates also played a significant role in shaping Antarctica's past. The continent travelled from equatorial and temperate zones to its current position over millions of years. While drifting, its climate shifted gradually. It passed through eras of subtropical warmth, cooler temperate regions, and transitional periods before finally settling into the polar region, where ice eventually formed. This slow, steady movement means ancient structures built during warm periods would not have been destroyed immediately by freezing. Instead, they would have been covered gradually by cooling temperatures and accumulating snow eventually sinking beneath layers of ice that hardened over time. The combination of warmth, vegetation, fresh water, volcanic activity, and geological stability made Antarctica a viable location long before ice dominated it. This version of the continent might seem unrecognizable to modern observers, yet it forms a logical foundation for theories that suggest early civilizations could have operated there. When people hear about ancient civilizations, they often envision structures in deserts, valleys, or mountain regions where remnants remain visible. Antarctica's ancient landscape fits that visualization more comfortably than its current appearance suggests. Over the past century, scientists conducted numerous investigations to understand Antarctica's past climate. Ice cores offer a detailed record of atmospheric conditions when the ice formed, while deeper layers of rock reveal what came before. These records show that the shift from green to frozen did not occur suddenly. It took millions of years for ice sheets to form and expand. This slow transition is crucial to the idea that ancient structures could still exist below the surface. If the ice had appeared rapidly, it could have crushed and destroyed anything beneath it. Instead, the freezing happened gradually enough that early structures, if present, would have been buried gently under accumulating layers of snow and eventually preserved by the cold. This gradual preservation mirrors processes observed in other regions where ice protects, rather than destroys, ancient remains. Organic material preserved in glaciers or permafrost demonstrates how effective ice can be at maintaining structures and artifacts over extremely long periods. Bones, clothing, tools, and even entire animals have emerged from melting ice almost entirely intact after thousands of years. If small remains can survive in such conditions, larger structures built from strong materials could endure for far longer. The continent's earlier climate also helps explain why legends from Mesopotamia or other ancient cultures do not reference ice or cold when describing southern regions. If memories of a distant land filtered into early stories, they may have reflected descriptions of a warm and fertile continent rather than a frozen desert. These memories would not match Antarctica's modern appearance, but they would align closely with what the land looked like before the ice formed. Ancient texts often refer to lands beyond the known world as green or resource-rich, and the ancient Antarctic fits that description during several geological periods. Before the freeze, the continent held a wide range of habitats. Some regions resembled modern-day forests in areas that experience seasonal light, but maintain relatively mild temperatures. Other regions hosted marshlands, river valleys, and coastal zones, where marine and terrestrial life interacted. These diverse environments suggest that any civilization, human or otherwise, could have found locations suitable for construction, agriculture, or settlement. This versatility supports theories that see Antarctica as a potential site for early activity. Archaeologists have long noted that early civilizations tend to build on stable land with predictable environments. They seek regions where materials are abundant and where the landscape remains relatively unchanged over long periods. The ancient Antarctic offered these features. Its position on the supercontinent Gondwana gave it geological stability, and its climate zones shifted slowly over millions of years, creating long periods during which construction would have been feasible. This setting provides a rational backdrop for the idea that the earlier structures built by a visiting group like the Anunnaki could have been established there. Carbon dating, fossil analysis, and sediment studies consistently support the conclusion that Antarctica maintained warm periods long enough for advanced life to thrive. Some studies indicate that trees once grew near regions now considered among the coldest on Earth. Their roots and preserved remains were found beneath thick layers of rock, displaying patterns typical of temperate or subtropical species. These discoveries further confirm that the continent's past appearance diverged sharply from its current condition. This earlier environment helps explain why legends often describe distant lands in terms that seem impossible today. Many myths portray ancient places as fertile, expansive, and filled with resources or unusual geographic features. Over time, changes in climate or continental drift can alter the appearance of these lands so drastically that their ancient descriptions appear unrealistic. Antarctica exemplifies this transformation. What was once a warm, inviting region became the coldest and least accessible place on the planet. Legends that reference a distant southern land filled with life may unknowingly reflect an ancient reality that predates written history. The gradual formation of Antarctica's ice sheet marks one of the most significant environmental transformations on Earth. Researchers estimate that the first major ice accumulation began around 34 million years ago during a global cooling period. Even after this initial shift, warming cycles occasionally melted significant portions of the ice, allowing vegetation to reappear temporarily. The permanent ice sheet did not fully establish itself until much later. Once in place, it thickened over time, burying the land beneath it more effectively than any other geological process could. The extraordinary depth of the ice plays a crucial role in the preservation of anything that might lie below. In some areas, the ice reaches more than 3 miles in thickness. This dense layer protects the bedrock from erosion caused by wind or rain. The pressure compresses everything beneath it without necessarily crushing it completely. The freezing temperatures halt decay and biochemical processes that would otherwise break down organic material. This level of preservation is unparalleled in most parts of the world. Only extremely dry deserts or deep underwater environments preserve remains for similar lengths of time. The landscape underneath the ice includes mountain ranges, valleys, lakes, and plains. Some of these features were unknown until the mid-20th century. Scientists discovered entire subglacial lakes, including the large Lake Vostok, which remains sealed beneath ice that has covered it for millions of years. This demonstrates how effectively the ice conceals and preserves entire bodies of water. It also shows that whatever lies below remains insulated from external forces. This environment strengthens the possibility that ancient structures, if present on the continent's surface before freezing, could remain in recognizable form. The existence of these features suggests that the land beneath the ice has not changed in ways that would erase large structures. Mountains still stand, valleys remain carved, and rock formations maintain their shapes. If the ice sheet contains anomalies with geometric patterns or unusual alignments, these patterns could represent remnants from ancient times. Radar technology revealed such anomalies in various locations. These findings often spark debates among scholars, yet the presence of unexplained formations supports continued exploration of theories involving early civilizations. Understanding the continent before its transformation allows the story to move toward how theories about ancient civilizations align with geological evidence. The presence of a warm, stable environment, followed by gradual ice accumulation, creates conditions ideal for long-term preservation. This setting matches the concept of early structures built by beings described in myths and preserved under increasingly heavy layers of ice. Moving from the ancient climate into the development of early maps and accounts that reflect knowledge of an ice-free southern land continues the story. These records form the earliest threads that drew people to connect prehistoric Antarctica with legends describing visitors who may have left structures behind long before the continent froze. Exploring the idea that ancient structures could lie beneath Antarctica often leads to a series of historical puzzles that don't align easily with modern understanding. Among these puzzles is a small group of maps that depict coastlines, shapes, and land masses that should not have been known to the people who created them. These documents appear across different centuries and regions, each containing details about the southern part of the world long before explorers reached those latitudes. The presence of these maps adds another dimension to the story of a continent that once held forests and rivers, because cartographers recorded shorelines that only existed before the ice formed. Their work suggests that ancient knowledge, preserved through unknown channels, reached the hands of map makers who lived thousands of years after the climate changed. The most well-known of these maps comes from the 16th century. It was created by a cartographer who had limited access to formal exploration data. yet his map contains features that remain difficult to explain. The coastline drawn on the southern portion of his work corresponds to the shape of Antarctica without its ice sheet. This level of accuracy should not have been possible, because official exploration of the southern region had not begun. The only way to create such a map would be to use source material far older than the ice that covers the continent today. This possibility has intrigued researchers for decades, as it implies the existence of earlier civilizations capable of surveying coastlines and preserving their records through long stretches of time. Other maps from the same period contain similar anomalies. Their creators included references to lands no one had yet reached, along with details that make sense only if someone once observed the region before the ice formed. These cartographers often credited older sources, noting that they relied on records passed down from ancient cultures. These records weren't available in large numbers, and many have been lost. The surviving maps serve as fragments of knowledge from an earlier world. Their details suggest familiarity with regions that could only have been explored during periods when Antarctica's coastline was accessible and free of ice. The accuracy of these southern outlines becomes more striking when compared with modern reconstructions of the continent's ancient geography. Using radar, sonar, and satellite technology, scientists identified the bedrock beneath the ice and traced the contours of the land as it existed millions of years ago. The resemblance between these scientific reconstructions and certain historical maps continues to draw attention. These similarities do not guarantee that ancient civilizations surveyed the continent, but they do indicate that someone in the distant past possessed knowledge that cannot be explained by the known history of exploration. The cartographers who created these maps were not attempting to recreate the past. They were drawing the world as they believed it to be in their own time. Their access to older documents gave them information they incorporated into their work, without knowing the geological implications. They didn't realize they were depicting a continent from a period long before the existence of the societies that preserved the records. This lack of awareness shows that the knowledge embedded in these maps was not a deliberate attempt to document prehistory. Instead, it appears as an accidental survival of information from a forgotten era. When mapmakers used ancient sources, they often mentioned the fragmentary nature of these documents. Some were damaged, incomplete, or translated multiple times through different languages. Despite these limitations, the southern outlines remained consistent across different maps, suggesting that the original source material came from a civilization with advanced geographical understanding. This becomes even more significant when considering that most civilizations before the classical era focused their mapping efforts on regions close to home. They had no need to create detailed depictions of distant continents they never intended to visit. For a map to include the accurate outline of a landmass in the far south, the original creators must have had direct access to it. This raises questions among researchers about who might have visited Antarctica before it froze. If early civilizations were not known to travel to those regions, then someone else must have reached the continent. This possibility aligns with theories involving ancient visitors described in myths, such as the Anunnaki. According to some interpretations of these stories, these beings travelled across large distances and established structures in remote areas. A warm, green Antarctica would have served as a logical location for such activity. If they built an outpost or conducted research there, then they would have also mapped the surrounding coastlines. These maps, passed down indirectly through ancient cultures, could have become the sources used by the later cartographers. Certain maps also depict features that align with geological formations beneath the ice. Mountain ranges known only through modern surveys appear in these maps as outlines or shaded regions. These ranges were not discovered until the 20th century. The presence of such features in early maps indicates that the original source material contained more than superficial observations. It reflected detailed knowledge of the land. This detail strengthens the argument that the maps preserve information older than any surviving civilization. Some historians attempt to explain this by suggesting that cartographers relied on speculation or symbolic representations of southern lands. However, Speculation rarely produces results that align precisely with scientific data millions of years old. Symbolic representations vary widely, yet these maps maintain consistent shapes and coastlines. Their accuracy cannot be dismissed as chance. The alignment between ancient depictions and modern geological reconstructions suggests a lineage of knowledge transmitted through channels that remain unknown. The preservation of such knowledge through multiple civilizations requires a strong record-keeping tradition, access to stable documents, and the ability to translate continents that shifted across time. Only a small number of known civilizations developed the capacity for detailed cartography. Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece all maintained sophisticated record-keeping systems. If they inherited maps or data from an even older civilization, they would have passed these records to later cultures. The transmission would have happened through libraries, trade, conquests, and scholarly exchanges. Over time, the original context would have been lost, but the geographical details would have remained. The presence of these maps adds another layer of support for theories about ancient activity in Antarctica. If early civilizations had no reason to explore the far south, then the knowledge reflected in these maps must have come from a different source. This point aligns with the idea that visitors described in myths may have had access to technologies capable of surveying the globe. A civilization with the ability to travel long distances could have mapped Antarctica before it froze. They might have done so to assess resources, establish outposts, or gather information. If such a civilization existed, then their maps could have formed the origin of the ancient documents that later cartographers used. The survival of these maps, despite the destruction of countless documents throughout history, speaks to the durability of certain sources. Libraries in antiquity suffered fires, invasions, and natural decay. Many records vanished, but some knowledge survived through copies, translations, and compilations. The maps depicting the southern continent likely passed through several layers of preservation. Their accuracy suggests that the earliest versions were created during a time when the coastline was accessible. This means the knowledge predates the ice and belongs to a period far outside the timeline of human exploration. The geographical accuracy of these maps attracted the attention of researchers from different fields, including anthropology, geology, cartography, and archaeology. Each field interprets the maps through its own lens. Geologists compare the coastlines to ancient shorelines. Archaeologists look for signs of cultural influence in the map-making style. Cartographers analyse the techniques used to draw the land. These multidisciplinary studies reveal consistent patterns that support the idea of ancient knowledge embedded in the maps. Some researchers emphasise the precision of the southern coastline. The accuracy is present not only in general shape, but also in specific details, such as the indentation of bays, the extension of peninsulas, and the curvature of shorelines. These details match reconstructions of Antarctica before ice reshaped the continent's edges. The match becomes more striking when considering that modern coastlines differ from ancient ones due to ice weight, glacial movement, and sea level changes. This means the maps reflect a version of the continent that no human civilization has ever seen firsthand. Other maps from different centuries and regions contain similar anomalies. Their creators worked independently of one another, yet they incorporated outlines that resemble an ice-free Antarctica. This consistency suggests that each mapmaker relied on a common set of ancient sources. These sources may have originated from a civilization that existed long before the rise of known societies. The ability to survey coastlines with such precision implies access to advanced tools or knowledge. This aligns with theories that associate the earlier structures on Earth with beings described in ancient myths. The maps also reveal an understanding of the southern hemisphere that exceeds the capabilities of early explorers. Most ancient civilizations lack the maritime technology to navigate open oceans safely for extended periods. Yet the maps reflect familiarity with regions far beyond their reach. This suggests that the knowledge did not come from direct exploration by those civilizations. It arrived through inherited documents, preserved without full understanding of their origin. The unusual nature of these maps encourages further examination of the environment that existed before the freeze. The coastline depicted in them represents a time when the land was accessible, warm, and habitable. This reinforces the idea that structures built during that era could remain preserved beneath the ice. The maps serve as indirect evidence of a world long forgotten. They don't depict buildings, but they depict the land where buildings could have stood. They don't describe civilizations, but they describe the stage on which such civilizations might have acted. Researchers who study these maps often note that the accuracy suggests more than casual observation. It suggests systematic mapping. Systematic mapping requires deliberate effort, advanced tools, and a structured approach. This kind of mapping does not arise spontaneously. It points to a civilization with the ability to calculate distances, measure coastlines, and preserve the data. The presence of such a civilization in the distant past aligns with theories that view early myths as remnants of historical events. The existence of multiple maps with similar southern coastlines strengthens the argument that ancient knowledge circulated more widely than previously believed. It suggests that early civilizations inherited fragments of information from a source older than themselves. The maps function as windows into that source. Their accuracy continues to challenge traditional explanations of history and exploration. These maps then become part of a larger story that includes geological evidence, ancient legends, and unexplained anomalies beneath the ice. Each piece supports the possibility that the southern continent once hosted activity now lost to time. The maps contribute by confirming that someone, at some point, saw the continent before it froze. Moving deeper into this line of thought naturally leads toward the individuals and theories that attempted to interpret these southern anomalies, and the explorers and researchers who dedicated their efforts to understanding why so many layers of evidence continue to point toward a continent that once held far more than ice. Interest in Antarctica's hidden possibilities has never faded even as modern science advanced and exploration expanded across the globe. The idea that something significant might lie under the ice has drawn the attention of explorers, scholars, researchers, and countless individuals who simply feel that the continent holds more than frozen landscapes. Antarctica stands apart because it resists easy investigation. While nearly every other region on Earth has been mapped, excavated, or at least observed directly, the southern continent remains concealed beneath layers of snow and ice that stretch farther and deeper than any other cold environment. This concealment creates a unique set of conditions that encourage theories to grow, especially those involving ancient civilizations or structures left behind in eras long before the world took its current shape. Many early explorers who ventured south did so with a sense of uncertainty, moving across icy terrain that offered no clear path, landmarks, or signs of human life. Their accounts describe a landscape that feels untouched, almost as if it has been waiting for discovery. Some explorers noted unusual formations in the distance, including shapes that appeared too regular to be natural, though the harsh environment often prevented them from investigating further. These early observations became seeds for later theories. They reflected glimpses of the unknown that encouraged speculation about what might lie beneath the ice, preserved by extreme conditions that shielded the land from erosion, weathering, and human interference. Scholars began examining Antarctica from a different angle as geological evidence emerged. Studies of the continent's ancient past revealed that it once held forests, lakes, and living ecosystems. The revelation that Antarctica had a warm climate at various points in Earth's history created a new context for considering what might have occurred during those eras. Scholars compared this warm, fertile land with myths, maps, and legends from ancient cultures that describe distant regions filled with life or activity. These comparisons encouraged further analysis of stories that might have originated from memories of a time when Antarctica looked entirely different. The parallels between geological findings and mythological descriptions added weight to theories that suggested early civilizations could have existed there. Even within academic circles where skepticism remains strong, the presence of anomalies detected through radar and satellite imagery has kept the discussion alive. These anomalies include patterns that resemble geometric shapes or linear formations. While many of them can be explained as natural geological structures, certain shapes stand out because they diverge from typical formations known in glaciated regions. Some researchers view these anomalies as possible indicators of artificial construction, while others consider them artifacts of ice movement or rock formations. The debate itself contributes to the steady interest in the continent. Antarctica's ice prevents easy verification, and this barrier creates space for theories that persist without being disproven or confirmed. One reason people continue to explore ideas about hidden structures is the continent's sheer scale and inaccessibility. Large portions of Antarctica have never been directly surveyed by humans. Even advanced equipment struggles to scan the deepest layers of ice consistently. This limitation leaves vast regions undocumented. When a place remains unavailable for direct observation, it naturally becomes a canvas for theories. The lack of visual confirmation does not eliminate possibilities. Instead, it preserves them. Explorers and scholars have noted that environments where data is limited tend to inspire long-lasting speculation, because each gap in the record becomes an opening for new interpretations. Dreamers and theorists often focus on the connection between Antarctica and ancient visitors described in mythology. These stories portray beings who arrived long before recorded history and established structures or outposts far from early human settlements. Antarctica, during its warm periods, matches the description of a land capable of hosting such activity without interference. The vastness and seclusion of the continent make it an appealing candidate for theories involving civilizations that operated outside the timeline of human development. These theories persist because they align with narratives found in ancient texts, and because they fit within the geological timeline that shows Antarctica's climate was once favourable for habitation. Interest in Antarctica also stems from its consistent ability to produce discoveries that challenge earlier assumptions. Over the past decades, scientists have uncovered subglacial lakes, mountain ranges, and entire valleys that remained hidden for millions of years. These discoveries demonstrate how much remains unknown beneath the ice. Each revelation shows that even close to the modern era, new information still emerges from the continent. This pattern encourages further speculation. If modern research continues to uncover features as large as mountain ranges, then the possibility of finding something constructed during a warm era becomes more plausible. Theories involving early civilizations often draw from the idea that Antarctica could serve as a natural vault. Ice protects structures far more effectively than soil or rock. Extreme cold slows decomposition, halts biological activity, and preserves materials that would otherwise decay. Many theorists believe that if a structure exists beneath the ice, it could remain nearly intact even after millions of years. This idea stands on solid scientific understanding of how ice preserves organic and inorganic matter. Preserved animals, plants, and artifacts from other cold regions illustrate how powerful frozen environments are at maintaining their contents. This preservation leads to another reason why scholars and dreamers continue to look south. If evidence of early civilizations existed elsewhere on Earth, much of it would have eroded over time due to exposure to weather, vegetation, and human activity. Antarctica is different. It has remained isolated from human development and natural erosion. This isolation offers the possibility that clues to ancient activity could remain sealed within the ice. The idea that the continent may contain the most pristine archaeological site on Earth creates a sense of anticipation among those who study its history. The relationship between Antarctica and theories involving ancient visitors has also been shaped by technological advancements. As radar systems improved, researchers began to detect shapes and anomalies beneath the ice that sparked curiosity. Some of these findings gained attention outside scientific circles. Their interpretations varied widely, creating a range of theories from the reasonable to the speculative. Regardless of interpretation, these findings highlight the presence of unknown structures or formations. The uncertainty surrounding them fuels ongoing interest. Scholars attempt to interpret the data scientifically, while theorists explore possibilities outside conventional frameworks. Satellite imagery introduced a new layer of intrigue. High-resolution images occasionally reveal patterns that stand out from the surrounding terrain. These patterns sometimes appear angular or symmetrical in ways uncommon in natural formations. Scholars attempt to analyze these formations through geological processes, while theorists compare them to known features of ancient architecture. Even when natural explanations exist, the presence of unusual patterns encourages further study. The possibility that something unexpected may lie beneath the surface continues to motivate researchers to examine the imagery closely. Another component of the interest in Antarctica's hidden features comes from historical accounts of expeditions. Several explorers in the early 20th century described sightings of structures or formations that seemed unusual given the natural landscape. These descriptions often involved distant ridges or shapes that appeared artificial from a distance. Although many of these observations remain unverified due to inaccessible terrain, they contribute to the collective sense that the continent may hold more than ice and wind. These accounts remain part of the lore surrounding Antarctic exploration and often serve as inspiration for continued inquiry. One theory that persists across time involves the possibility that Antarctica once served as a strategic or scientific centre for a civilization older than any known human culture. Supporters of this idea point to the continent's former climate and position. A warm, stable landmass located at a southern latitude could have provided an ideal location for observation, experimentation, or resource collection. Its isolation from human settlements would have created a controlled environment where activities could take place without interference. These advantages align with stories describing early visitors who engaged in work separate from human society. Some scholars speculate that if such a civilization existed, their structures might have been large enough to leave detectable signatures beneath the ice. Large foundations, buried complexes, or reinforced structures could produce shapes observable through radar or satellite imaging. The anomalies already detected in some regions match this possibility, although definitive proof remains out of reach. These shapes encourage continued exploration despite the challenges posed by the continent's climate. Theories also grow from the realization that Antarctica has undergone dramatic transformations over time. A landmass that shifts from warm forests to frozen expanses represents one of the most significant changes on Earth. Such transformations can preserve evidence of ancient activity beneath newly formed layers. This sequence of preservation encourages explorers and scholars to examine the continent not only for its modern features, but also for what lies beneath the surface. The more dramatic the transformation, the more likely it becomes that ancient evidence may still exist in recognizable form. Interest in Antarctic theories extends beyond scientific communities because the continent offers a space where imagination and research intersect. The lack of direct access allows ideas to persist without being disproven or confirmed. This unique characteristic creates an environment where speculation can coexist with serious study. Many theories remain active because neither scientific evidence nor exploration has reached the depth required to evaluate them completely. Antarctica's inherent inaccessibility makes it a place where the unknown endures naturally. The continued examination of Antarctica also reflects the human drive to understand origins. Many ancient cultures produced myths describing early visitors, lost lands, or powerful civilizations that disappeared without a clear trace. These myths raise the possibility that the history of the world may contain events not captured in surviving records. Antarctica offers a setting where such events could have occurred without leaving traces in familiar archaeological sites. This connection keeps scholars and theorists returning to the continent even when definitive evidence remains elusive. Ongoing research efforts focus on new technologies capable of penetrating deeper into the ice. As these tools improve, the possibility of detecting structures or unusual formations increases. Each advancement encourages renewed interest in what might be discovered. The anticipation of future breakthroughs maintains momentum among research teams and theorists alike. Even modest findings can inspire extensive discussion, especially if they reveal features not previously seen. The strongest driver of continued exploration is the awareness that Antarctica still holds large regions completely unsurveyed. Theories involving ancient civilizations continue to develop because they provide frameworks for interpreting anomalies. These frameworks allow people to connect geological, historical, and mythological evidence into coherent narratives. While these narratives vary widely in interpretation, they share a common belief that the continent may hide remnants of a time when the world looked very different. This shared belief sustains interest and encourages further exploration. The ongoing study of Antarctica's hidden features leads naturally into the next phase of inquiry. After examining the theories that draw explorers and scholars toward the southern continent, the focus moves toward the specific shapes and formations detected beneath the ice. These formations, whether natural or artificial, play a central role in understanding why the continent continues to attract attention, and why the possibility of ancient structures remains an active topic of investigation. Antarctica's surface gives the impression of emptiness, but the land beneath the ice contains features that challenge expectations in ways few other environments can. The continent hides a landscape that does not match the uniform snowfields seen from above. It holds mountain ranges, valleys, cliffs, and ridges that remained concealed for millions of years. As research teams began using increasingly advanced tools to study what lies below, strange shapes appeared in the data. These shapes cannot be viewed directly, yet their outlines under the ice have created ongoing debates among geologists, archaeologists, and scientists working in related fields. The shapes include patterns that look too regular to be natural, formations that hold angles rarely produced by geological processes, and shadows detected through remote sensing that seem to represent structures larger than anything currently built by human hands. These discoveries began with early radar surveys that revealed the first hints of the continent's hidden terrain. The radar pulses penetrated the ice and reflected off the solid land below, producing images that represented the surface of the buried landscape. At first, researchers expected to find simple bedrock with scattered mountain ranges. Instead, the radar captured lines and shapes that didn't match what they anticipated. Some formations had the jagged, uneven look of natural mountains, but others displayed smooth, continuous edges. A few ridges ran in straight paths for long distances, others turned sharply at consistent angles. These features did not resemble typical geological formations found in glaciated environments. The surprise created an immediate need for further study. Teams expanded the radar surveys to cover larger portions of the continent. As the maps grew more detailed, additional anomalies appeared. Some areas showed rectangular outlines buried under miles of ice. Others contained clusters of shapes arranged too symmetrically to be dismissed easily. The more researchers examined the data, the more unusual the landscape seemed. While some anomalies could be explained by natural processes such as fault lines, rock fractures, or pressure from shifting ice, several patterns resisted simple categorization. Among the earliest anomalies observed was a set of angular shadows near a mountainous region located far inland. These shadows represented sudden changes in elevation that formed straight boundaries instead of the curved lines normally produced by erosion. The sharpness of the angles stood out immediately. The formations looked as though someone had carved deep trenches or constructed enormous walls before the ice accumulated. As scientists analysed the data, they attempted to identify geological processes capable of producing these shapes. None of the usual explanations fit well. The shapes were too large and too precise to align with fractures created by tectonic movement. They also lacked the randomness associated with natural ice structures. More anomalies surfaced when satellite imagery improved. High-resolution scans captured surface depressions and raised areas that mirrored the angular patterns detected by radar. Even though the ice concealed the structures completely, small distortions on the surface revealed the presence of something solid below. These surface distortions extended over long distances, meaning whatever lay below them was substantial in size. The shadows created by sunlight across the snow highlighted subtle shifts in elevation that formed repeating patterns rarely seen in untouched environments. Some regions contained triangular shapes with sides that matched in length. Natural formations can create triangular patterns, but the consistency in these shapes raised interest among researchers. The triangles formed part of larger arrangements that appeared planned rather than random. They were separated by narrow passages or depressions that maintained uniform width. These characteristics led some specialists to propose that the shapes might belong to large-scale rock formations created by volcanic activity. However, volcanic formations tend to produce irregular shapes. The uniformity observed beneath the ice deviated from that explanation. Another set of anomalies showed long corridors or lines stretching across significant distances. Their widths remained constant, suggesting a degree of precision not typically found in natural channels formed by water or ice movement. These lines intersected with other formations at repeating intervals, forming a grid-like pattern. Natural fault lines do not usually create evenly spaced intersections, and glaciers do not carve such consistent paths through bedrock. The consistent spacing and lengths challenged attempts at conventional explanation. In addition to geometric formations, researchers found a cluster of large dome-shaped structures buried beneath the ice. These domes were massive, rising hundreds of meters above the bedrock. Their smooth curves contrasted sharply with the jagged mountains around them. While geological domes can form naturally, they rarely appear as isolated clusters with identical dimensions. These buried domes were aligned in a formation that appeared deliberate. The alignment extended across a wide region, maintaining consistent orientation despite the rugged terrain surrounding it. The discovery of these domes caused intensified interest, because similar formations have been found in other parts of the world where ancient civilizations once lived. Though natural explanations exist, the combination of their shape, size, and arrangement in this context made them stand out. Some researchers suggested that pressure from ice movement could create such shapes over time, but further studies indicated that the domes did not match typical pressure ridges or ice deformations. As radar technology advanced further, scientists gained access to three-dimensional reconstructions of the hidden landscape. These reconstructions revealed additional details that were not visible in earlier scans. Some of the formations displayed depth profiles that mirrored man-made architecture. Certain areas showed vertical drops that were too steep and consistent to be attributed to glacial carving. Other areas contained flat plains at the base of steep slopes, a combination rarely produced through natural processes in glaciated zones. Another anomaly involved a large rectangular region with edges that remained straight for many miles. The corners of the rectangle showed distinct angles that aligned closely with right angles. Natural processes can produce rectangular shapes under specific conditions, but such formations are extremely rare, especially at this scale. This rectangular outline gained attention among theorists who believed it might represent the remnants of an enormous foundation or structural platform. Although this interpretation remains unproven, the shape continues to be part of ongoing analysis. Scientists studying these features are cautious about the conclusions they draw. They recognize that nature is capable of producing patterns that mimic artificial construction. However, the combination of multiple anomalies across different regions strengthens the argument that something unusual lies beneath the ice. Each formation on its own could be explained through geological processes. Together they form a landscape that challenges conventional explanations. Theories about the origins of these shapes fall into several categories. Some specialists believe that the anomalies are remnants of an ancient landscape shaped by geological forces during periods when Antarctica's climate differed drastically from its current condition. They propose that volcanic activity, continental drift, and erosion could create unusual shapes that later became preserved beneath the ice. These explanations rely on the planet's ability to produce unusual formations under specific environmental circumstances. Another group of researchers suggests that these shapes could represent remnants of unknown prehistoric civilizations. This interpretation draws from the combination of map anomalies, mythological references, and the continent's ancient climate. Supporters of this theory argue that if a civilization operated in Antarctica during its warm period, its structures would now lie beneath the ice. They point to the geometric shapes detected in radar scans as potential evidence of walls, foundations, or complexes built during that era. Some theorists believe that the shapes might be associated with the same beings described in ancient stories from various cultures. These stories portray visitors who arrived before the emergence of human civilization and built structures in remote regions. The presence of angular formations, grid-like patterns, and dome-shaped anomalies beneath the ice aligns with interpretations of myths that describe advanced construction. This perspective views the anomalies as possible remnants of early activity carried out on a continent that once offered hospitable conditions. Debates about the origins of these shapes continue to evolve as new data becomes available. Each new radar scan or satellite image adds to the discussion. Even when natural explanations seem plausible, the unusual combination of patterns beneath the ice keeps interest alive. Antarctica's hidden landscape remains one of the least understood environments on Earth. The difficulty of accessing the land directly prevents researchers from conducting traditional excavations or surveys. This limitation ensures that the anomalies continue to spark theories, as no definitive proof can be obtained without direct contact. The presence of these shapes also influences how researchers interpret anomalies detected in other parts of the world. Large stone structures, underground complexes, and ancient foundations found in different continents provide context for analysing the Antarctic formations. Some scholars compare the shapes beneath the ice with known patterns in ancient architecture. While these comparisons do not offer conclusive evidence, they highlight similarities that encourage further study. Interest in the anomalies extends beyond academic circles. Many people are drawn to the idea that Antarctica might conceal something extraordinary. The landscape below the ice holds an air of secrecy that fuels imagination and speculation. The possibility that ancient structures lie preserved in near-perfect condition beneath miles of ice offers a compelling narrative that continues to attract attention. Research into these formations requires collaboration among experts from multiple fields. Geologists, physicists, cartographers, engineers, and archaeologists each contribute specialized knowledge to interpreting the data. This multidisciplinary approach increases the likelihood of identifying natural explanations, but it also allows room for alternative interpretations when natural explanations fall short. As the continent remains one of the least accessible places on Earth, most discoveries rely on remote sensing rather than direct observation. This reliance on indirect measurements adds complexity to the analysis. While remote sensing can reveal shapes and outlines, it cannot distinguish definitively between natural and artificial formations. Researchers can measure dimensions, angles, and depths, but the true nature of the formations remains concealed under thick layers of ice. Advancing technology continues to improve the accuracy of radar and satellite imaging. Each improvement offers a clearer picture of the land beneath the ice. These advancements may eventually reveal whether the formations are natural or artificial. For now, they continue to inspire theories that contribute to the broader story of Antarctica's past. The unusual shapes serve as a focal point for the next steps in understanding the continent's role in ancient history. They anchor discussions about how myths, maps, and geological findings converge. These shapes guide researchers toward areas that merit further study, offering clues about what might lie beneath the surface. As exploration continues, the anomalies beneath the ice lead naturally into the question of why certain myths associate early visitors with remote regions. and how those stories might reflect memories of activity that occurred during Antarctica's warm periods. Ideas about the earliest arrivals of advanced beings on Earth often revolve around patterns found in myths, geological clues, and unexplained structures scattered across the planet. In the stories that describe the Anunnaki, their presence appears in eras that predate the rise of human civilization. These stories portray them not as wandering visitors, but as organized groups with specific purposes and strategies. Understanding why such a civilization might choose the southernmost region of the world as a point of arrival requires examining conditions that existed when Antarctica was warm and accessible. It also requires examining the broader context in which an early, technologically capable group would select landing sites, operational areas, or remote bases. In many ancient narratives, the arrival of advanced groups is not depicted as accidental. These accounts show strategic movement, planning, and careful selection of locations. They imply that the first places chosen for settlement or activity offered security, resources, and seclusion. A warm Antarctica matched these conditions at the time such stories might describe. The continent's earlier climate offered stable terrain, fresh water, and geological resources. Its remote position provided separation from early human groups, allowing for activities to occur without interference. The land was large enough to support significant construction while remaining isolated from areas where early humans eventually developed. Antarctica's geography during its warm phases offered a wide range of environments. From coastal plains to mountain ranges, the continent contained features suitable for observational outposts or long-term operations. Its position at the southern edge of the globe created advantages for a civilization seeking control over large-scale mapping or geological study. The land stability may have allowed for easy construction of structures that required firm foundations. These features, paired with the continent's isolation, would appeal to any group seeking a location for activity independent of human contact. The arrival of a lost civilization, if it occurred, would likely involve strategic considerations similar to those seen in the establishment of early human settlements. Settlements are often placed where geographic features offer protection, resources, and control. For a group operating far beyond the technological capacity of early humans, Antarctica would serve as an ideal foundation for long-term projects. Its distance from populated regions of the time ensured that activities could take place without drawing attention. Its position at the edge of the ancient world created a natural boundary that discouraged early humans from reaching it, reinforcing the remoteness desired by an advanced civilization. Some modern theories suggest that if the Anunnaki existed as described in ancient texts, they may have required materials or environmental conditions available in limited regions. Antarctica's geological history includes mineral deposits, volcanic systems, and natural heat sources that could have been useful. Active volcanic regions may have provided energy. Mineral-rich terrain could have supplied resources not available elsewhere. These conditions might explain why a civilization would select the continent as a landing zone or early operational center. Another aspect of the arrival story involves the need for controlled environments. The stability of Antarctica's earlier climate allowed activities to occur without sudden environmental shifts. Its long periods of consistent temperature, minimal seasonal variation, and long coastlines offered predictable patterns that supported long-term planning. The slow drift of the continent over millions of years would not have affected short-term operations conducted during a warm period. Any structures built during such an era would have remained intact until the eventual freeze buried them under accumulating layers of snow and ice. Isolation also plays a central role in many arrival narratives. Ancient stories often describe beings who kept their distance from early humans, except when specific interactions were required. This distance reflects an approach that values separation from developing civilizations. Antarctica's isolation during its warm phases matched this preference. The continent remained far from early human migration routes. It offered a location where large projects or experiments could occur without influencing early societies. Such separation ensured that early humans would remain unaware of the civilization's presence, preserving the independence of both groups. Some theorists propose that the continent also provided advantages for astronomical observation. A stable southern location allows consistent monitoring of celestial patterns, which may have been important to a civilization with advanced knowledge. During warm periods, the skies above Antarctica would have offered clear visibility for extended periods, especially in dry interior regions. The importance of astronomical alignment in many ancient structures across the world supports the idea that early civilizations valued observation points. A southern outpost would have provided unique vantage points for tracking large-scale cycles or changes. Legends describing the arrival of advanced beings often include references to ocean travel or descent from the sky. Antarctica's location along ancient ocean routes would have supported maritime arrival. Its coastal regions during warm periods would have offered deep harbours, gentle shorelines, and stable docking areas. These features support the possibility of arrival by sea. If arrival occurred from the sky, the continent's open plains, flat regions, and lack of human presence would have allowed safe landings or construction without obstacles. The idea that the Anunnaki would avoid areas heavily populated by early humans aligns with stories that describe their activity as separate from human settlements. Humans at the time lacked advanced tools or technology, and their presence might have complicated the goals of a group with carefully planned operations. Antarctica's remoteness ensured that early humans would remain unaware of any activity occurring there. This separation would support the controlled development of resources or structures without interference. Some interpretations of ancient stories emphasize the significance of beginnings occurring in remote locations. These beginnings serve as foundations for later events, influencing the shape of human history in subtle ways. If early activity took place in Antarctica, it would have created a starting point removed from human observation. This distant foundation could then influence developments across the world without direct involvement. The legends describing distant origins or hidden locations may reflect memories of this early stage, preserved through symbolic language rather than direct description. Antarctica's location at the southern end of the world also offered strategic benefits for monitoring Earth's magnetic field. This field plays a role in navigation, climate, and planetary behavior. A civilization capable of advanced understanding may have chosen to establish an outpost in the region to track magnetic variations or study Earth's energetic systems. The continent's placement near a magnetic pole provides access to data not available elsewhere. This might have supported research goals or helped in understanding the planet's structure. Some accounts of the Anunnaki emphasize their need for specific resources that could be extracted from tectonically active regions. Antarctica's volcanic systems may have offered those resources. The presence of geothermal activity could have supported heating, power generation, or other technological functions. These advantages would make the continent appealing for industrial or scientific centres. The structures built in such environments might have been designed to take advantage of volcanic heat or natural energy flows. The eventual freezing of Antarctica adds another layer of interest to the arrival story. If structures existed during warm periods, the slow accumulation of ice would have covered them gradually without causing immediate destruction. This slow burial would preserve their shape and protect them from environmental changes. Over millions of years, the ice would lock these structures in place, making them nearly impossible to detect without advanced scanning tools. This natural preservation system increases the likelihood that remnants from that era might exist beneath the surface today. The long period of ice coverage ensures that anything built on the land during its warm period would remain shielded from erosion, contamination, or collapse. Unlike other regions where wind, rain, earthquakes, and vegetation destroy structures over time, Antarctica's ice maintains structural integrity. If the Anunnaki constructed anything significant there, its preservation under the ice represents a unique opportunity for archaeological discovery once technology becomes capable of reaching sufficient depths. Historical accounts of ancient civilizations often include references to lands that disappeared or became inaccessible. These narratives may reflect memories of continents that change dramatically. When a land transforms from warm forest to endless ice, its earlier identity vanishes. Stories passed down through generations preserve only fragments of what came before. These fragments sometimes describe distant lands that served as homes or meeting places for beings who influenced early humanity. If these stories refer to Antarctica, they represent a cultural memory of the continent's ancient past. The strategic decision to place early structures in such a location aligns with a desire to remain hidden while maintaining operational freedom. Ancient narratives depict beings who held knowledge far beyond that of early humans. They likely understood that human civilizations would expand over time. Placing initial activity in Antarctica ensured that early humans would not encroach upon or disturb their work. This forward-thinking approach matches descriptions of purposeful, calculated behavior found in many ancient accounts of the Anunnaki. Antarctica also offers advantages for long-term secrecy. Once the ice formed and thickened, any structures built earlier would become completely invisible to the civilizations that later rose across the world. The continent became an inaccessible realm. Explorers from later eras could not reach it, and even if they did, they lacked tools to detect anything below the surface. This concealment would preserve the legacy of the civilization in perfect isolation. The ice served as a natural barrier that ensured the structures would remain untouched. Modern researchers studying Antarctica's hidden formations often note that certain anomalies resemble large-scale bases or foundations. These shapes align with interpretations of ancient stories describing significant structures built far from human populations. If these structures served as initial landing areas, research centers, or operational hubs, their placement in Antarctica makes sense. The shapes detected by radar and satellite imaging may represent outlines of these early constructions. Interest in the continent's role in ancient history continues to grow as more anomalies are detected. The possibility of early activity beneath the ice adds context to the story of warm Antarctica. It places the geological findings, ancient maps, and mythological references into a unified narrative. Theories that examine why a lost civilization would choose Antarctica find support in the continent's ancient conditions, strategic advantages, and natural concealment. The story of arrival transitions gradually into the concept of early structures built by advanced groups. These structures, if they existed, would have been constructed during Antarctica's warm period and preserved beneath the ice as temperatures dropped. Understanding why the Anunnaki or any advanced civilization might select the region provides the foundation for exploring the nature of what they may have built there and how those structures could appear in the anomalies detected today. Imagining the earlier structures created by a civilization that arrived during Antarctica's warm period requires grounding the idea in the continent's ancient landscape and the myths that describe beings whose capabilities exceeded those of early humans. The stories that reference the Anunnaki often portray them as skilled builders who worked with precision and purpose. If such a group chose Antarctica as an early location for activity, their structures would have reflected those qualities. The environment of the time offered stable ground, fresh water, and volcanic heat sources that could support long-term construction. Building in such an environment before the ice formed would have allowed them to establish outposts, research centers, or operational hubs capable of enduring for long periods even after the climate shifted. To visualize what those first structures might have looked like, it helps to consider the landscape that existed then. Antarctica was a continent covered with forests, rivers, and open plains. Mountain ranges rose above valleys filled with vegetation. Coastlines stretched far beyond the ice shelves that define the region today. Structures built during that period would have stood in stable conditions, rather than the extreme cold and shifting glaciers now associated with the continent. These structures could have been built on bedrock, anchored into natural formations, or integrated with volcanic regions to take advantage of geothermal heat. A civilization with advanced engineering would not have relied on fragile materials. They would have selected strong elements that could endure environmental changes. Stone foundations, reinforced surfaces, and materials designed to outlast natural erosion could have formed the basis of their structures. These choices would ensure longevity long after the climate changed. As temperatures dropped and snow began to accumulate, the structures would not collapse instantly. They would remain standing for thousands of years before becoming encased in ice. Over time, the ice would thicken, pressing down on the land beneath it, but the structures could still hold their form if built with resilient designs. If the Anunnaki created outposts in Antarctica, the designs might have reflected functions described in ancient texts. Many stories portray their activity as organized and systematic. They established places for governance, research, or observation. Some texts describe areas of assembly or meeting points where decisions were made. These descriptions suggest that early structures would not be random or improvised. They would follow specific architectural plans that supported large-scale operations. Such structures might include central complexes surrounded by auxiliary buildings, large platforms used for transport, and enclosed areas for protection against environmental conditions. The ancient myths often reference large stone foundations that served as focal points for activity. These foundations appear in many cultures as places where significant events occurred. If similar foundations existed in Antarctica, they might appear in radar scans as rectangular or polygonal shapes with sharp edges. These shapes have already been noted in some surveys, showing outlines that remain consistent despite the thick ice above. Such outlines could represent the earliest layer of construction placed on the continent. If the structures extended upward from these foundations, the upper levels may have collapsed or shifted due to ice movement, but the lowest layers would remain intact. Some anomalies detected in radar surveys resemble corridors or passageways. These long, narrow shapes stretch across significant distances. Their widths remain consistent, suggesting that they were not created by natural fissures or faults. If the Anunnaki built transport routes, tunnels, or storage chambers, these shapes might correspond to those features. Advanced civilizations tend to create straight, uniform passages for efficiency. These corridors could have connected different parts of an outpost, allowing movement and transport across the complex. The ice above them would preserve their paths even if the internal structures collapsed. Another type of anomaly identified beneath the ice includes large dome shapes. These formations stand out because they differ from the jagged mountains and irregular hills surrounding them. If a civilization constructed dome-like structures for climate control, scientific observation, or storage, these features might match that design. Domes created with durable materials could survive long after their internal components deteriorated. Their shape helps distribute pressure evenly, making them less vulnerable to collapse under the weight of ice. The radar images showing rounded shapes align with this possibility. Natural domes exist, but the clustered arrangement of the Antarctic formations appears unusual enough to support alternative interpretations. Some theories suggest that an early outpost would have required energy systems. Antarctica's volcanic regions could have supplied geothermal power. If the Anunnaki harnessed these energy sources, their structures might cluster near volcanic zones. These areas remain warmer than their surroundings even today. Radar scans have detected unusual formations near such zones. If structures were built into volcanic rock, they might include reinforced tunnels or chambers designed to channel heat. Over time, these structures could harden and integrate with the surrounding rock, creating patterns that contrast with natural formations. In ancient narratives, structures built by advanced beings often serve multiple purposes. They function as administrative centers, scientific laboratories, or places for storage of valuable materials. A single complex might contain various compartments, platforms, or levels dedicated to different activities. If such a complex existed in Antarctica, it would produce layered formations detectable through radar imaging. Some of the anomalies beneath the ice show depth variations that could correspond to multi-level structures. These variations appear as stacked or tiered shapes in some radar reconstructions. Natural processes can create layers, but the uniformity and spacing seen in certain regions raise interest among researchers who study the data. The shape of the outpost would depend on the goals of the civilization. If the Anunnaki sought to monitor Earth's magnetic field, the structure could include tall, narrow components designed to measure or align with magnetic currents. These components would not survive intact after millions of years, but their bases might leave behind patterns that resemble evenly spaced pillars or supports. Radar scans have detected such patterns in isolated areas. These patterns consist of vertical interruptions in the bedrock that appear equally spaced. Natural explanations exist, but the regularity remains unusual. If the purpose involved geological study, the structures might integrate with the natural landscape. They could include carved channels for extracting materials, platforms for observation, or reinforced areas designed to support large equipment. Such features would appear as geometric interruptions in the rock. Certain anomalies match this description, showing step-like patterns carved into slopes. These steps do not follow typical erosion patterns. Their consistent height and width suggest they may have been shaped intentionally. The first structures could also include large open courtyards or platforms. If the civilization conducted activities requiring open space, these platforms would serve as central areas. Over time, the ice would press downward, flattening the platforms further but preserving their outlines. Radar imaging in some regions shows flattened expanses with sharply defined borders. These shapes do not match the surrounding natural terrain, which creates irregular curves rather than flat areas with straight boundaries. The scale of the outpost remains a significant factor in understanding what might lie beneath the ice. Myths that describe the Anunnaki often portray them as capable of large-scale projects. They worked with materials, tools, and techniques that allowed them to build structures beyond the capabilities of early humans. If they applied these methods in Antarctica, the structures might have covered large regions. Some radar anomalies span several kilometers, hinting that the formations may not be isolated. If the outpost included multiple connected sections, the resulting patterns would extend across wide areas, consistent with what radar and satellite images reveal in certain places. Another aspect to consider involves the structural design choices an advanced civilization might employ to withstand environmental changes. Even though Antarctica was warm during the likely period of construction, the civilization could have anticipated future changes in climate. If they predicted long-term shifts, they might have designed structures capable of enduring cold, snow, and ice. They may have anchored their constructions into bedrock to prevent movement during tectonic shifts or glacial buildup. Anchoring techniques leave behind specific marks in the rock, including deep sockets, straight channels, and uniform recesses. Some anomalies beneath the ice resemble such recesses. These features appear carved rather than fractured. Stories describing the Anunnaki often highlight their ability to work with enormous stones or materials fused with heat. If they created structures in Antarctica using such methods, the resulting formations would resist collapse. Heat-treated materials become extremely durable. They fuse with neighbouring stones or minerals, creating solid masses that withstand pressure. Ice pressing against these structures would not break them easily. Instead, it would mould around them. This interaction could produce the straight edges and geometric shadows observed in radar data. Some ancient accounts refer to structures built partially underground. If the outpost included subterranean sections, these areas would remain better preserved than surface components. Underground chambers resist erosion even in shifting climates. As ice formed above them, they would become sealed off. Radar surveys reveal several deep cavities beneath the Antarctic ice. These cavities have unnatural shapes compared to typical ice-carved caves. Some have smooth walls and flat bases, suggesting they may not be natural voids. These features stand out as possible remnants of underground construction. Structural elements like ramps, platforms, or stepped designs could appear in radar imagery as alternating layers with consistent spacing. These layers have been observed in certain regions. They form patterns that do not match typical sedimentation or glacial deposition. The layers appear too uniform, suggesting deliberate placement. If the outpost contained multiple levels or terraces, these patterns may represent collapsed or degraded remains of those sections. Any external structures exposed during the early freezing process would eventually become partially embedded within the ice. Over time, they might shift, tilt, or compress, but the underlying shape would remain detectable. Some anomalies show angled lines that slope into deeper regions. These angled lines might reflect remnants of tall structures that leaned under the pressure of ice. Their angle remains consistent across several scans, suggesting they share a common origin. The concept of an outpost implies not only buildings, but also infrastructure supporting movement and energy. Roads, landing platforms, or transport corridors could produce long, flat features beneath the ice. These features may appear as wide depressions or elevated ridges. Several of the formations observed match such descriptions. They stretch in straight lines, occasionally intersecting other features at precise angles. Their length suggests they may have served as pathways or routes between different parts of the outpost. Even water systems built during the warm era might leave behind traces. Channels created to direct water would carve specific patterns into the land. If reinforced or modified, these channels could persist beneath the ice. Some radar scans show long grooves that resemble man-made aqueducts more than natural riverbeds. Their walls remain too straight, and their curvature too uniform for typical natural water flow. As temperature dropped and snow accumulated, these structures would gradually disappear from the surface. The slow build-up preserved their outlines rather than destroying them. Over millions of years, the ice thickened, compressing but not erasing the shapes. The preservation under the ice provides a unique opportunity to study ancient structures if they existed. The continent's isolation ensured that no later civilizations disturbed them. Some modern researchers examining the anomalies emphasize that no single feature proves the existence of artificial structures. Instead, the combination of geometric lines, rectangular shapes, dome clusters, straight corridors, uniform terraces, and unusual cavities forms a collective pattern. This pattern resembles the layout of a large complex rather than random geological formations. Even if natural processes contributed to some features, the overlapping anomalies remain difficult to explain entirely. If the first structures built by the Anunnaki once stood on Antarctica, their remains would match these patterns. They would consist of foundations anchored in bedrock, corridors connecting different areas, domes serving specialized functions, platforms supporting operations, underground chambers designed to last, and terraces shaped for stability. All of these elements could survive beneath the ice due to the strength of their materials and the slow nature of the freezing process. These preserved shapes play a central role in the continuing interest in Antarctica's hidden landscape. They align with myths describing early construction by advanced beings, geological evidence showing that Antarctica once supported life, and maps suggesting that ancient civilizations once knew of the continent's ice-free form. Each anomaly contributes to a broader picture, suggesting that the continent may hold remnants of an early outpost. As attention shifts from what these structures might have looked like to how modern researchers interpret the signals detected beneath the ice, the story naturally progresses into the observation methods used today. These methods reveal how scientists, explorers, and theorists attempt to read the signs hidden in the frozen layers, shaping the next phase of the understanding what might lie beneath Antarctica's silent surface. Interest in Antarctica's hidden landscape expanded rapidly once technology advanced enough to peer beneath the ice. What began as scattered clues slowly developed into a steady stream of radar readings, satellite images, thermal scans, and geological assessments. Each new layer of information added detail to the picture below the frozen surface, yet none of it removed the uncertainties that surrounded the continent's hidden features. Scientists continued to gather data. Satellites mapped the terrain with increasing clarity, and researchers from various fields revisited the anomalies with new tools. Despite these efforts, many of the most unusual formations remained unexplained. Their persistence created an atmosphere where scientific curiosity merged with speculation, and rumours circulated among researchers, explorers, and enthusiasts who followed the discoveries closely. The earlier scientific expeditions to Antarctica focused on surface exploration rather than the land buried beneath the ice. These teams documented mountains, valleys, and glaciers, noting the harshness of the environment and the difficulty of reaching its interior. As technology improved, attention shifted to the subsurface. Aircraft equipped with ice-penetrating radar formed the first systematic attempts to map the hidden terrain. The results were unexpected. Data showed not only mountain ranges but also valleys that ran deeper than anything visible from the surface. Scientists expected varied landscapes, but the strange geometric shapes detected among natural formations added a layer of complexity that the early teams did not anticipate. These discoveries encouraged further research. Satellite technology advanced rapidly during the second half of the 20th century, allowing for higher resolution scans and improved imaging of regions previously out of reach. Scientific agencies and independent research groups participated in mapping the continent. The new imagery revealed distortions in the ice sheet that hinted at objects or formations beneath it. While many distortions appeared natural, some showed patterns inconsistent with common geological explanations. These patterns became points of interest for interdisciplinary teams seeking to understand the full history of the continent. As more data arrived, teams working in glaciology examined how ice flows might influence the shapes detected below. Glaciers move slowly over time, altering the landscape beneath them. They carve deep channels, smooth rough surfaces, and create pressure zones that distort rock. Many anomalies could be interpreted as results of glacial movement. However, certain features remained difficult to categorize. Straight edges, sharp angles, compressed clusters, and consistent spacing appeared in locations unaffected by typical glacial processes. These features became the focus of discussions among researchers who specialized in interpreting ice-penetrating radar. The growing data set encouraged scientists from other disciplines to join the analysis. Geologists studied the shapes to determine whether they fit known forms of faulting or natural folding. Some features matched expectations, but others did not. Geometrically precise shapes, flattened platforms, and evenly spaced ridges challenged explanations rooted in natural processes. These formations appeared in regions where geological activity had been minimal for millions of years. The lack of tectonic events in those areas removed several possible explanations. This led to closer scrutiny of the anomalies through multiple types of scans and modelling systems. Thermal imaging produced further intrigue. Satellites capable of detecting heat signatures recorded unusual thermal patterns in restricted zones of the continent. Some regions emitted more heat than expected for their elevation and location. In many cases, geothermal activity could explain these variations. Antarctica contains several volcanic systems that create heat under the ice. Yet certain thermal patterns did not align with volcanic zones. Instead, they appeared in areas where radar had already detected geometric formations. The presence of heat in these regions suggested internal structures that retained warmth or allowed geothermal energy to escape through specific openings. These findings led to speculation among researchers who suspected that the anomalies could represent remnants of ancient structures that interacted differently with surrounding ice. Materials that retained heat or insulated certain sections could produce detectable thermal patterns. Natural formations can produce similar effects, but the correlation between geometry and heat suggested a relationship worth exploring. Scientists approached the idea carefully, seeking natural explanations first, while acknowledging that some patterns resisted easy categorization. As satellites continued their surveys, new data emerged showing small variations in surface elevation that hinted at large objects buried beneath. Satellites measuring gravitational differences across the continent detected mass concentrations in certain regions. These gravitational anomalies indicated the presence of dense material below the ice. Some could be explained by rock formations or mineral deposits, yet others existed in areas where neither geological surveys nor seismic studies had predicted such concentrations. The alignment between gravitational anomalies and earlier radar findings caught the attention of researchers attempting to build a complete picture of the subsurface. The presence of these anomalies led to internal discussions within scientific organizations. Researchers debated whether the unusual shapes represented geological formations, remnants of past volcanic activity, or something unexpected. Some teams published cautious studies indicating that natural explanations were likely, while others highlighted elements that warranted continued investigation. The lack of definitive answers allowed a range of interpretations to circulate without being dismissed entirely. Rumours began to spread during this period, fueled by the difficulty of accessing the most interesting regions. Harsh weather, restricted areas, and limited logistical capabilities prevented direct exploration. Even large research stations faced constraints on how deep they could drill or how far they could travel. Satellite data became the primary method of studying the continent, and while these tools offered valuable information, they also left room for uncertainty. The inability to confirm findings on the ground allowed theories about buried structures to persist. Some of these theories gained traction among researchers who observed consistent geometric patterns across multiple datasets. These specialists took interest in the correlation between anomalies detected by radar, thermal imaging, and gravitational surveys. The convergence of these different signals in the same regions suggested that the formations had underlying structure. While natural explanations remained possible, the combination of evidence made simple solutions less convincing. Researchers involved in these studies maintained professionalism, yet they acknowledged that certain features remained unresolved. The rumours intensified when satellite images captured shadows and surface distortions that hinted at regular patterns beneath the snow. Some images showed faint lines extending across the landscape. Their consistent spacing and direction raised interest among those studying subsurface structures. Although many shadows could be attributed to surface wind patterns, snow dunes, or variations in ice thickness, certain images showed angular shapes that matched earlier radar findings. The appearance of such shapes in multiple imaging techniques created a sense of continuity that strengthened the idea that something unusual lay beneath. A few scientists involved in Antarctic research mentioned privately that the anomalies suggested artificial origins. Their remarks did not appear in published reports, but they circulated in discussions among colleagues and in presentations given to small academic gatherings. These remarks acknowledged that while natural explanations remained possible, the patterns did not fully align with expectations. This openness added credibility to the rumours, as they originated from individuals familiar with the data rather than from outside speculation. Independent researchers began to analyse the publicly available satellite data. Their interpretations varied, but many pointed to the same regions identified by scientific teams. These independent studies added further layers to the conversation, as they often highlighted details overlooked in broader surveys. Some emphasised the rectangular outlines visible in radar layers. Others pointed to the positions of thermal anomalies relative to ancient volcanic zones. These analyses did not replace scientific research, but they contributed to the growing interest surrounding the continent's hidden features. The rumours gained further momentum when certain areas of Antarctica became restricted or received limited access. While such restrictions often relate to environmental protection, scientific safety, or logistical concerns, they provided fertile ground for speculation. Theories circulated that the restricted areas overlapped with the most intriguing anomalies. Whether accurate or not, the connection enhanced the belief that something significant might exist beneath the ice. Scientists aware of these rumours maintained that the restrictions were practical rather than secretive. However, the timing of access changes combined with the emergence of new anomalies gave the perception that crucial discoveries might be taking place. This perception became part of the narrative surrounding Antarctica's hidden landscape. Even without official confirmation, the combination of scientific data and persistent rumours kept attention high. The interest in the anomalies extended into engineering fields. Experts in structural design examined the radar images and gravitational maps, noting that some shapes resembled foundations large enough to support extensive complexes. The dimensions involved exceeded those of known ancient structures across the world. Engineers speculated that if such foundations existed, they would require advanced building techniques. These interpretations did not claim that the structures were artificial, but they pointed out that the patterns matched characteristics of intentional construction. In parallel, some researchers studying ancient myths and historical accounts re-examined stories describing early civilizations or advanced beings who arrived long before known human history. These researchers compared the descriptions of structures, outposts or meeting places with the shapes detected in Antarctica. The similarities encouraged further interdisciplinary dialogue. Stories that once seemed symbolic gained new relevance when viewed through the lens of geological and satellite data. This created a connection between ancient narratives and modern discoveries. Satellite monitoring expanded to include changes over time. As ice moved slowly across the continent, certain patterns shifted subtly in response to hidden objects beneath them. Watching these changes allowed scientists to estimate the size, shape, and density of buried formations. Some anomalies resisted movement or altered ice flow patterns around them. These effects suggested that the formations were solid and sizable. Natural formations could produce similar results, but the persistence of specific patterns maintained interest among scientists studying the ice. Thermal fluctuations recorded through satellites showed that some regions retained heat longer than surrounding areas. These heat signatures did not always align with known geothermal activity. Their repeated appearance over time raised new questions among researchers who tracked them. The heat signatures appeared in areas where radar scans had already indicated rectangular outlines or dome-shaped anomalies. The overlapping evidence from different technologies strengthened the case that something unusual existed below. Seismic studies performed in certain regions added another layer of information. Vibrations passed through the ice and reflected differently depending on the structure of the land beneath. Some readings revealed inconsistencies that did not match known rock types or geological formations. These inconsistencies appeared near the same locations identified by radar, thermal, and satellite data. The convergence of evidence from multiple scientific methods made the anomalies difficult to dismiss outright. Researchers involved in these studies presented their findings cautiously to avoid overstating conclusions. They noted that while unusual formations existed, further investigation was limited by the continent's harsh conditions. Drilling into areas of interest required specialized equipment, extensive planning, and the ability to transport heavy machinery across treacherous terrain. These limitations prevented direct exploration of the most intriguing locations. The lack of direct verification allowed theories to persist, supported by the unresolved nature of the anomalies. The rumours associated with these discoveries evolved as new information emerged. Some individuals believed the anomalies represented ancient structures built by a forgotten civilization. Others connected the findings to myths about early visitors described in ancient texts. A separate group proposed that the shapes reflected natural formations that happened to resemble artificial construction. The diversity of interpretations reflected the continent's complexity and the challenges of studying environments hidden beneath miles of ice. The persistence of these rumours does not stem from unsupported speculation alone. It also arises from the consistent appearance of patterns that defy simple explanation. Each new data set reinforces earlier findings rather than contradicting them. The shapes remain visible in radar images, gravitational scans, and satellite photographs. Thermal signatures appear in the same regions across multiple recording periods. Seismic readings highlight differences in density and structure. This accumulation of evidence maintains interest even among skeptical researchers. Some scientists have stated that the anomalies could represent remnants of a landscape shaped during periods when Antarctica was warm and habitable. Ancient rivers, volcanic structures, or sediment layers might form patterns that mimic artificial construction. These explanations remain valid. However, natural formations rarely combine geometric precision, consistent spacing, and repeated shapes across large areas. The unique combination found in Antarctica continues to draw attention because it does not fit cleanly into existing models. The ongoing flow of data ensures that the conversation about Antarctica's hidden formations remains active. Researchers continue to refine their tools, collecting deeper radar scans and higher resolution satellite images. Each improvement reveals new details while keeping earlier anomalies in view. The resulting picture invites more investigation rather than closure. The scientific community recognizes the need for expanded studies of Antarctica's subsurface. The interest extends beyond efforts to understand ancient activity. The anomalies may reveal important information about Earth's geological history, climate shifts, and tectonic processes. Their study contributes to a broader understanding of how the planet evolved. Even if the formations prove natural, their unusual characteristics still advance scientific knowledge. As the story moves forward, the presence of unresolved anomalies sets the stage for examining geological processes that shape the continent. Understanding how ice interacts with the land below and how that interaction can preserve or distort ancient formations becomes central to the next phase of exploration. Antarctica's ice sheet behaves as both a guardian and an adversary to the landscape beneath it. It shields whatever lies below from the natural forces that reshape continents, yet it also compresses, distorts, and masks everything it touches. This dual role turned the continent into a geological puzzle. The same ice that protects ancient structures from erosion also makes them nearly impossible to verify. Researchers examining the hidden terrain must interpret signals filtered through miles of frozen layers. These layers consist of compacted snow, compressed by weight and time into ice, dense enough to bend mountains. The complexity of this environment explains why the continent continues to inspire theories about forgotten civilizations, unexplained structures, and remnants of activity from eras that preceded the oldest human records. Understanding how ice affects the landscape beneath it requires examining the slow transformation that turned a warm, forested region into the coldest place on Earth. When the continent drifted southward, conditions gradually shifted. Snowfall increased, temperatures dropped, and the early stages of glaciation began. The ice sheet built itself layer by layer. Snow settled gently at first, then compacted into firn, and finally hardened into glacial ice. Over millions of years, the thickness increased to extremes unmatched elsewhere. The weight of such an enormous mass pushed downward with relentless force. Bedrock bent under the pressure, valleys deepened, and plains shifted. Yet the ice did not destroy everything entirely. It preserved features beneath it by shielding them from wind, water, and biological decay. The preservation effect is strongest in areas where the ice moves slowly. In regions where the sheet remains stable, geological formations beneath it retain their original shape. Any structures present during the early freezing process would have experienced gradual burial rather than immediate collapse. As new layers formed above them, the pressure increased, but the low temperature slowed physical degradation. This process created conditions under which organic material can endure for tens of thousands of years. Inorganic structures, if built with resilient materials, could endure for much longer. The ice acts as both armour and seal, locking in the shapes below. However, preservation does not mean perfect clarity. Ice flows across the continent in slow but continuous motion. These movements alter the appearance of what lies beneath. Ice distorts shapes, stretches lines, and shifts boundaries. Radar signals reflect these distortions because they cannot pass through ice without interacting with its layers. Each layer represents a different density, temperature and age. These differences influence how radar beams scatter. As a result, the images scientists interpret can contain stretched features, blurred edges, and angles that appear partially warped. Distinguishing between natural distortion and the original shape beneath becomes a central challenge. The geological puzzle intensifies when considering that ice does not move uniformly. Some regions remain nearly static, others shift in narrow streams called ice flows. These streams move at different speeds depending on temperature, slope, and the shape of the land below. Where ice flows push downward into valleys, the pressure increases. Where they slide across flat terrain, the distortion spreads horizontally. This creates a varied landscape of pressure zones that influence how subsurface structures appear in radar images. A perfectly straight edge might appear curved if the ice above has shifted unevenly. A dome shape might flatten slightly under heavy pressure. A corridor-like feature could stretch in length while shrinking in width. The impact of these distortions complicates interpretations, giving natural formations the appearance of artificial ones, or giving artificial forms the qualities of natural features. To understand how these distortions occur, researchers study the internal structure of the ice. The layers resemble thin sheets stacked over millions of years. Each sheet forms during a particular climate period, capturing tiny particles that serve as records of past conditions. These layers compress under the weight of the layers above. The compression is not uniform. Warmer periods produce softer layers that compress more easily. Colder periods create harder layers that resist deformation. As these layers press and shift, they cause bending within the ice sheet. This bending stretches and compresses the radar paths, producing visual irregularities. Thermal variations within the ice also influence distortions. Warmer regions allow ice to flow more readily. Colder regions lock ice in place. When radar passes through areas with temperature differences, the varying densities alter the signal. These interactions create light and dark shades in the final image. Sometimes these shades resemble geometric shapes. Sometimes they highlight genuine structures. Without direct access to the land below, scientists must interpret these mixed signals carefully. While distortions complicate interpretation, they also demonstrate the durability of the formations beneath. If large shapes remain visible despite movement, compression, and temperature fluctuations, their resilience suggests significant structural integrity. Researchers often point out that the clearest anomalies appear in regions where the ice has moved slowly for long periods. These stable regions preserve shape more reliably. The anomalies found there often contain straight lines, right angles, and repeated patterns that are difficult to attribute to distortion alone. Even when softened by ice pressure, their persistence suggests that the original forms remain solid. The concealment aspect arises from the sheer thickness of the ice. Many anomalies lie more than a mile below the surface. Radar struggles to penetrate such depths. Signals weaken, scatter, and sometimes fail to return clear reflections. In some regions, the ice's internal structure prevents data collection entirely. This lack of visibility creates uncertainty and allows theories to flourish. Scientists know that large structures can remain invisible due to the limits of current technology. The absence of direct evidence does not rule out their existence. It merely reflects the difficulty of navigating a landscape hidden under vast frozen layers. The concealment intensifies as ice buries sediments deposited by earlier climates. Ancient riverbeds, former coastlines, and long-extinct lakes remain trapped beneath the ice sheet. These features can appear in radar scans as shapes that resemble architectural structures. Channels carved by water can look like corridors. Shorelines can form long straight lines that resemble walls. Geological faults can appear as sharp angles. Their resemblance to artificial structures complicates interpretations. Some anomalies match natural processes. Others do not follow expected geological patterns. Identifying which shapes belong to natural landscapes and which may originate from construction requires comparing formations across multiple scans layers, and imaging types. The preservation of subglacial lakes adds another element to the puzzle. Some lakes remain liquid due to geothermal heat or pressure-induced melting. Their presence influences the ice above, altering flow patterns. When radar scans cross these areas, reflections change. These reflections can create the illusion of structures. They can also reveal anomalies that follow unnatural paths. Scientists working in these regions notice that some anomalies do not align with lake boundaries or known geothermal sources. Their independence from obvious natural causes strengthens interest in their origin. Pressure exerted by the ice alters the depth and location of sediments as well. Layers that once rested on flat ground may tilt or fold under glacial movement. These folds appear in radar images as curves or sharp angles. If the original material beneath the ice was arranged in geometric patterns, the folding could distort their appearance. Even with distortion, however, the underlying structure could remain recognizable. Researchers analyzing these shapes look for repeated patterns or relationships between angles and distances. These patterns remain visible even through distortion, suggesting intentional organization. Seismic studies contribute to understanding the land beneath the ice. Vibrations traveling through ice and rock reveal density differences. When these vibrations encounter uniform material, they travel consistently. When they encounter interruptions, they produce reflections. These reflections can indicate voids, cavities, solid masses, or layered structures. Seismic readings in certain regions of Antarctica show strong, consistent interruptions arranged in repeating patterns. Natural formations can produce similar signals, but the consistency across large areas sets these particular readings apart. Their organization suggests that something beneath the ice has structural qualities not easily explained through geological folding or faulting. The vastness of the ice sheet introduces yet another complexity. The continent is nearly the size of Europe. Only a small portion has been surveyed with advanced tools. Entire regions remain unmapped. Some areas are too remote or dangerous to reach. Others fall outside the logistical capacity of research teams. This incomplete coverage ensures that many anomalies remain undiscovered. The few that have been detected represent only a fraction of what may lie beneath. The incomplete dataset contributes to the ongoing mystery. Scientists acknowledge that Antarctica's hidden landscape contains more secrets than known facts. The nature of ice allows it to both conceal and reveal over time. As glaciers move slowly, they can expose previously hidden features or bury newer ones. Some anomalies may become clearer with future scans, while others may disappear entirely as the ice shifts. This dynamic environment requires continuous observation. Each new dataset must be compared with earlier results to track changes. Some formations show remarkable consistency across decades of scanning, suggesting their shape beneath the ice remains stable. These formations tend to attract the most interest from researchers studying potential ancient structures. The extreme age of the ice sheet also plays a role in how it conceals the land. Some regions contain layers older than many human civilizations. These layers encapsulate evidence of past climates and geological processes. Beneath them, the land may preserve much older features. A structure built millions of years ago could remain intact if it endured the early stages of glaciation. The presence of ancient bedrock unaffected by recent geological processes strengthens this possibility. Deep areas where radar has detected anomalies show limited signs of erosion. Their preservation suggests that whatever lies beneath the ice remains shielded from external forces. The distortion effect becomes most apparent in areas where the ice flows around obstacles. When ice encounters a solid mass, it moves around it. This movement creates patterns on the surface that reflect the shape of the object below. These surface patterns can appear in satellite images as faint lines or changes in texture. Researchers studying these surface indicators found that some correspond to anomalies detected through radar. This alignment across data types strengthens the case for solid mass structures beneath the ice. Natural formations also create these effects, but the consistency across different tools and time periods implies deliberate shapes in some regions. Scientists studying Antarctica's geological puzzle emphasize that the ice sheet is not static. Its movement, thickness, and temperature fluctuate. These fluctuations change how signals pass through it. A shape visible in one data set might appear softer in another due to seasonal or annual differences. This requires long-term observation to confirm whether anomalies represent persistent structures or temporary distortions. Regions that show consistent anomalies over decades gain credibility as possible sites of ancient formations. The distortions created by ice do not eliminate the possibility of artificial structures. Instead, they make interpretation difficult. A rectangular outline may appear stretched, but its corners remain visible. A corridor-like shape may seem bent, but its width remains consistent. A dome may flatten slightly, but its curve remains identifiable. These preserved characteristics allow researchers to differentiate between natural and artificial possibilities. The shapes that maintain their proportions despite distortion attract the most attention. Preservation, concealment, and distortion combine into a single phenomenon that defines Antarctica's hidden landscape. The continent is a geological archive where ancient forms survive beneath an ever-changing shield. The anomalies detected across the continent reflect this complexity. Some may originate from natural formations shaped by geological processes. Others may represent something built before the ice arrived. The interaction between these possibilities keeps researchers engaged. The puzzle remains incomplete, yet each piece adds detail to the broader understanding of the continent's past. As attention shifts from geological behaviour to the cultural memory preserved in ancient stories, the next phase explores how legends from early civilizations describe beings, structures, and events that align with the discoveries emerging from Antarctica's frozen depths. Legends from the world's earliest civilizations often contain fragments of events that seem too large, too distant, or too ancient to fit into the established timelines of human development. These fragments appear across continents in cultures separated by oceans and millennia, yet they share themes that persist with unusual consistency. Floods that reshaped the world, visitors who were not part of early humanity yet influenced its direction, civilizations that rose before recorded history and fell without leaving clear traces behind, hidden lands described as distant, cold, or unreachable. These recurring themes have become central to interpretations that link ancient myths to the possibility of forgotten activity in Antarctica before the ice formed. When researchers compare the stories to the geological and radar evidence emerging from the continent, the connections create a narrative that stretches beyond scientific data alone. Many of the earliest myths describe a world that underwent sudden transformative events. These events destroyed earlier civilizations, erased landscapes, and reshaped coastlines. The details vary by region, but the core elements remain stable. Ancient Mesopotamian texts speak of a deluge that covered the land. Similar accounts appear in Central and South America, where stories describe rising waters that claimed entire kingdoms. In parts of Asia, legends tell of early ages when great floods forced survivors to seek refuge on high ground. These stories recall a world that changed swiftly, leaving behind ruins or memories that outlasted the physical remnants. When viewed in combination, the myths suggest the presence of earlier worlds lost to environmental transformations. Antarctica's geological history aligns with these themes. Long before humans developed writing systems, global climates shifted dramatically. Sea levels rose, continental shelves submerged, and coastlines changed shape. These changes occurred during the same periods associated with legendary floods. If early civilizations existed during these periods, they would have witnessed environmental changes on such a scale that their stories would become embedded in cultural memory. As continents shifted and the climate cooled, regions once accessible became remote. Antarctica's transformation from a warm, vibrant land to a frozen desert represents one of the most dramatic examples of geological change. This transformation fits the pattern described in myths that portray the world as undergoing profound alteration. Another theme present in ancient stories involves the arrival of visitors who possess knowledge or abilities beyond those of early humans. These visitors appear in many cultural traditions. Some accounts describe them as beings who descended from the sky. Others portray them as travellers arriving from distant lands across the ocean. Their role in these stories varies. Some act as teachers who instruct humanity in governance, agriculture, architecture, or moral conduct. Others serve as rulers or overseers who guide early societies for a time before departing. These visitors carry an air of mystery. Their origins are unclear. Their technologies differ from those known to early humans. Their influence appears suddenly, without familiar cultural development leading up to it. These narratives align with interpretations that view the Anunnaki as a group distinct from early human populations. The stories describe them as arriving during a period when the world differed significantly from the later historical record. Their presence in remote locations, their large-scale constructions, and their sudden appearance in early myths suggest that their activity occurred during a time now obscured by environmental change. If they established outposts in distant regions, such outposts would become inaccessible as climates shifted. In the case of Antarctica, the freezing process would erase their presence from human memory while preserving their structures beneath the ice. Some myths describe lands located at the edges of the world, where early visitors established their first foundations. These lands often appear as cold, windswept, or remote. They are described as places where only the gods or advanced beings travelled, not early humans. These depictions do not reference Antarctica directly, but their descriptions align with the image of a southern continent that became unreachable as ice spread. The stories portray these locations as difficult to access, often hidden or lost, yet central to the origins of the early visitors. Such descriptions fit the idea of an outpost established in a region that later became engulfed by ice. The flood narratives also contain references to structures or places that survived destruction due to their elevation or isolation. These structures are described as built far from human settlements. Some myths mention that the earliest knowledge or artifacts came from these distant lands. If survivors from earlier civilizations fled to higher ground, they would have carried memories of the regions where the original structures once stood. Over time, these memories evolved into stories reflecting both the destruction and the distant beginnings of those structures. As ice covered Antarctica, the original locations would vanish, leaving myths as the only surviving traces. Another element that appears in many myths is the concept of a world that existed before the current one. These stories describe cycles in which earlier ages came to an end, giving rise to new eras with different climates and inhabitants. The idea of a world before the present aligns with the geological evidence showing multiple phases of climate on Earth. Antarctica experienced these cycles. It shifted from warm ecosystems to a frozen continent over millions of years. If early activity occurred during one of the warm phases, stories describing earlier worlds may reflect memories of those epochs. The tales of civilizations that rose and fell could represent the recollection of regions lost to climate change, including Antarctica. Some myths reference large structures built during these earlier worlds. These structures appear in descriptions as monumental, enduring, or crafted with precision not found in later human architecture. They are often associated with knowledge, power, or astronomical significance. Similar descriptions appear in accounts of structures allegedly built by the Anunnaki. If these structures existed in Antarctica, their disappearance beneath the ice would contribute to the sense of mystery surrounding them. Later cultures would retain stories of these constructions without knowing their locations. Over time, the stories would shift from literal descriptions to symbolic narratives. Legends from various regions mention beings who departed the world after completing their work. They did not die or disappear, but withdrew to distant lands. These destinations are sometimes described as inaccessible, frozen, or located at the ends of the earth. These descriptions align with the idea that the earlier structures were built in regions that later became uninhabitable, If the beings described in these myths maintained outposts in Antarctica, their departure would coincide with the continent's shifting climate. As ice accumulated, their structures would become buried, and their presence would fade from direct human memory. Another recurring idea involves knowledge preserved in unexpected places. Many ancient texts describe secret knowledge hidden in remote regions, protected from catastrophe. These accounts suggest that advanced understanding or technological information was stored in locations far from human settlements. If Antarctica served as an early outpost, it could have housed such knowledge. The freezing of the continent ensured that any information stored there would remain undisturbed. Myths describing hidden knowledge in distant lands may represent distorted memories of these storage centres. The alignment of these mythological elements with geological data strengthens the argument that ancient cultures preserved faint memories of Antarctica's early periods. Even though they lacked direct access to the continent, their stories carry themes that parallel the scientific understanding of its transformation. These parallels include warm lands that became frozen, visitors who established distant outposts, floods that erased earlier worlds, and structures that disappeared beneath shifting landscapes. The consistency across cultures suggests that these stories originated from a shared memory older than any surviving civilization. This shared memory could reflect oral traditions passed down for thousands of years, eventually evolving into the written myths found in ancient texts. If early humans witnessed the final stages of Antarctica's transformation, their accounts would incorporate elements of disaster, loss, and distance. Even without knowing the location's name, they would describe the events in ways that future cultures could interpret symbolically. Researchers examining these myths often note the unusual detail describing large structures submerged or hidden by environmental change. These descriptions mirror the process of Antarctica's burial under ice. The idea that vast constructions became inaccessible due to natural shifts appears repeatedly. Geologists studying the continent's subsurface have detected shapes that could align with these descriptions. The possibility that myths preserved memories of structures now buried beneath Antarctica emerges as part of the broader narrative connecting cultural stories and scientific evidence. Visitors described in ancient texts possess attributes that align with what can be inferred about the builders of the anomalies detected under the ice. They demonstrate advanced understanding of materials, astronomy, and architecture. Their activities focus on remote regions away from developing human societies. They appear suddenly and disappear gradually, leaving behind enigmatic structures. These characteristics match the theoretical profile of a civilization that could have operated in Antarctica during its warm period. Their presence would leave traces beneath the ice that resemble the anomalies detected by modern instruments. The stories describing the disappearance of these visitors often mention natural events that reshaped the world. These events resemble the geological changes that affected Antarctica as glaciation advanced. The alignment between mythic descriptions and geological processes suggests that early humans interpreted the transformation through symbolic language. Their stories preserve the essence of what occurred, even though the scientific mechanisms remained unknown to them. Flood myths remain central to this connection. They appear to reference large-scale environmental change rather than isolated events. The melting or freezing of massive regions could have contributed to rising sea levels or shifting coastlines. These transformations would leave a deep impression on early cultures. The stories describing them may contain fragments of real events tied to Antarctica's shift into its frozen state. The myths suggest that the world lost an entire region to environmental change, echoing the scientific understanding that Antarctica transitioned from a habitable land to an ice-covered continent. These narratives also include references to artifacts or knowledge transported from the distant lands before their disappearance. If the Anunnaki or another advanced group left structures or tools in Antarctica, survivors fleeing environmental changes may have carried fragments of these materials to other regions. Over time, these fragments could inspire myths describing gifts from visitors or objects of unknown origin. Such tales appear in various cultures, referencing tools, symbols, or architectural techniques that seemed advanced relative to their time. The strong presence of these themes across multiple civilizations highlights the possibility that myths contain encoded memories of events that occurred in prehistoric periods. While symbolic language and oral transmission altered the details, the core themes remained. Their persistence suggests that the memories were significant enough to survive cultural transitions, migrations, and the passage of millennia. These mythological threads provide another dimension to the discussion about Antarctica's buried landscape. They offer context for interpreting the anomalies detected beneath the ice. The shapes, patterns, and thermal signatures match elements described in stories about distant structures, advanced beings, and lands transformed by natural forces. While myths alone cannot prove the presence of ancient structures, they add depth to the narrative created by scientific data. As the story continues, the contrast between ancient beliefs, modern skepticism, and the interpretations that lie between them forms the next stage of exploration. Scientific perspectives diverge, cultural interpretations overlap, and the space between grounded evidence and persistent speculation becomes its own field of inquiry. Antarctica's hidden formations attracted interest from groups with different perspectives, each interpreting the same evidence through separate lenses. Scientists approached the anomalies with caution, grounded in data and guided by the limitations of existing technology. Believers in ancient civilizations or early visitors interpret the shapes as remnants of activity that predates human history. Between these two groups lies a broad middle ground that examines the evidence with curiosity, combining scientific reasoning with openness to possibilities not yet understood. This middle ground continues to expand as more anomalies appear in radar scans and satellite images. The lack of definitive answers allows each interpretation to persist, shaping a landscape of debate that remains dynamic despite decades of research. Skeptics focus on geological explanations for the unusual shapes detected beneath the ice. They highlight the natural processes capable of creating geometric patterns or large-scale structures that resemble artificial designs. Glacial movement produces deep channels, layered ridges, and flattened plains. Volcanic activity forms domes, terraces, and angled rock formations. Tectonic forces carve straight faults and create sudden shifts in elevation. These natural processes can overlap, producing landscapes that appear organized or intentional. Skeptics emphasize that the ice sheet distorts radar images, making it difficult to interpret the original shapes of the formations. They argue that the combination of natural geology and ice distortion explains most anomalies without invoking ancient civilizations. Skeptics also point to the lack of direct physical evidence. The thickness of the ice prevents excavation or physical sampling in most regions. Without direct access, interpretations rely on indirect measurements. Skeptics argue that radar and satellite data cannot confirm the presence of artificial structures. They note that similar debates occurred in other environments where unusual geological formations initially appeared artificial but later proved natural. Examples include rock formations shaped by erosion that mimic architecture, or mineral deposits arranged in configurations that resemble walls or chambers. Skeptics see Antarctica's anomalies as part of this broader category of geological illusions. Believers, by contrast, interpret the same data as evidence of advanced activity predating known civilizations. They focus on the precision of certain shapes that exceed what natural processes typically produce. Rectangles with consistent dimensions, long lines intersecting at stable angles, and dome-shaped formations arranged in uniform clusters stand out in the scans. Believers connect these shapes to myths describing early visitors, making the case that the anomalies represent remnants of structures built when Antarctica was warm and accessible. They suggest that ancient civilizations, including the Anunnaki, described in Mesopotamian texts, had the ability to construct large complexes in remote regions long before humans developed advanced architecture. Believers also find support in ancient maps that appear to depict an ice-free Antarctica. They argue that such maps indicate knowledge of the continent prior to its transformation into a frozen landscape. These maps reinforce the possibility that early civilizations once operated there. Combined with the anomalies detected by modern instruments, they form part of a broader narrative connecting ancient memory to modern discovery. Believers see the consistency across myths, maps, and scans as more than coincidence. They interpret it as an indication that something significant remains hidden beneath the ice. The middle ground emerges from individuals who recognize the limitations of current scientific tools while acknowledging the unusual nature of the anomalies. These researchers, enthusiasts, and analysts do not commit fully to either side. They examine geological explanations but also consider the possibility that the anomalies represent structures no longer accessible. They emphasize that many scientific breakthroughs occurred because of investigations into unexplained phenomena. The middle ground argues that dismissing the anomalies outright ignores the possibility that the subsurface landscape contains features not yet understood. This middle perspective supports continued study rather than definitive conclusions. It highlights areas where geological explanations fall short, while also recognizing that myths alone cannot confirm ancient structures. The middle ground avoids assumptions but values open investigation. It encourages the use of new tools and technologies that may reveal additional details. As techniques improve, the middle ground argues that interpretations should remain flexible. The continent's complexity requires patience, long-term observation, and a willingness to revise theories as more data becomes available. The debate among skeptics, believers, and the middle group reflects the nature of Antarctica itself. Its ice sheet hides evidence while preserving it. It shields the past while obscuring its outlines. This duality influences how each group interprets the anomalies. Skeptics emphasize the concealing role of the ice, arguing that distortions make artificial explanations unnecessary. Believers focus on the preserving role, noting that even distorted shapes can reflect underlying structures. The middle ground considers both aspects, recognizing that preservation and distortion can coexist within the same environment. The scientific community remains cautious, in part because of the limited data available. Only a fraction of Antarctica has been mapped with high-resolution radar. Large regions remain untouched by detailed surveys. Even within surveyed regions, the quality of data varies depending on weather conditions, ice thickness, and the capabilities of the instruments used. These limitations create gaps in knowledge that skeptics view as insufficient for drawing bold conclusions. Believers see these gaps as reasons to investigate further. The middle ground acknowledges the gaps but prioritizes gathering more evidence before leaning toward either interpretation. Another reason the debate continues involves the difficulty of accessing the continent. Antarctica's climate restricts research to brief windows each year. Expeditions require extensive planning, powerful equipment, and significant resources. Many regions of interest lie far from established research stations. Transporting heavy drilling machinery or large scientific teams across the ice is costly and dangerous. These challenges slow the pace of discovery. They also leave room for speculation, as restricted access prevents immediate verification of anomalies. The complexity of interpreting radar data adds another dimension to the debate. Skeptics argue that the shapes represent geological layers folded by ice movement. Believers maintain that the consistency of the shapes across multiple scans indicates artificial design. The middle ground focuses on analyzing patterns across different types of scans. When radar, gravitational maps, thermal imaging, and seismic data all indicate anomalies in the same location, the middle ground sees this as a reason to prioritize further study. These overlapping signals highlight regions where the subsurface landscape differs from expectations. Skeptics sometimes point to the continent's geological history as evidence for natural explanations. Antarctica contains mountain ranges, volcanic systems, sedimentary basins, and fault lines. These features reflect millions of years of tectonic activity. When ice interacts with these structures, it can exaggerate their geometry in radar scans. Skeptics argue that the anomalies detected align with these geological processes. They view the rectangular shapes as fault intersections, the dome formations as volcanic remnants, and the long corridors as subglacial channels created by meltwater. Believers counter that some shapes exceed what natural processes typically produce. They highlight formations that maintain consistent proportions across long distances. They note that natural channels rarely form perfect straight lines for miles. They examine shapes that repeat at intervals, suggesting intentional planning. These features, believers argue, indicate structural engineering rather than geology. The precision detected in certain regions reinforces the idea that something other than natural processes created the patterns. The middle ground analyzes both views, acknowledging that natural processes can create unusual formations, but also recognizing that some patterns remain difficult to explain. They focus on anomalies that appear in stable regions where ice movement has minimal influence. These regions offer the clearest signals. When geometric shapes appear in areas with low distortion, the middle ground considers the possibility that the shapes originate from the underlying land rather than from ice effects. Some anomalies appear repeatedly in data collected over decades, maintaining their proportions despite technological changes. Skeptics note that this consistency reflects stable geology. Believers argue that stability supports the presence of artificial structures. The middle ground examines the stability as evidence that the formations warrant further study, regardless of their origin. Disagreements among these groups remain grounded in how they interpret the same evidence. Skeptics work within established geological frameworks. Believers expand beyond them, and the middle ground navigates between both interpretations. These differing perspectives create a healthy tension that drives ongoing research. The absence of definitive evidence prevents the debate from reaching resolution. Instead, it sustains interest and encourages new investigations. The rise of independent research adds complexity to the conversation. Individuals outside of formal scientific institutions analyze publicly available data. Their interpretations vary widely, but they often identify anomalies overlooked in broader surveys. Some highlight patterns that align with artificial structures. Others propose alternative geological explanations. The presence of independent voices broadens the debate, exposing new ideas and interpretations. Skeptics sometimes dismiss these analyses, while believers embrace them. The middle ground evaluates them carefully, recognizing that useful insights can emerge from diverse sources. The circulation of rumors contributes to the ongoing discussion. Certain regions of Antarctica have restricted access due to environmental protections, scientific safety, or logistical reasons. These restrictions sometimes overlap with areas containing anomalies. This coincidence fuels speculation. Believers interpret the restrictions as evidence of secrecy or hidden discoveries. Skeptics attribute them to routine scientific management. The middle ground remains cautious, acknowledging that restricted access can complicate research without necessarily indicating secrecy. Despite the disagreements, all groups share an interest in understanding Antarctica's hidden landscape. Skeptics seek to refine geological models. Believers aim to uncover evidence of ancient civilizations, and the middle ground promotes open inquiry. This shared interest keeps attention focused on the continent, encouraging the development of new tools and research methods. Technological improvements continue to influence the debate. Advances in satellite imaging, radar penetration, and seismic mapping reveal new details each decade. Some anomalies become clearer, while others remain ambiguous. These developments shape interpretations. Skeptics view clearer images as opportunities to confirm natural explanations. Believers see them as chances to strengthen their case. The middle ground evaluates each new data set, recognizing that technology gradually reduces uncertainty. The interplay between data, interpretation, and belief reflects the wider human experience of confronting the unknown. Antarctica's subsurface offers a space where the limits of knowledge meet the persistence of mystery. Skeptics anchor themselves in data. Believers navigate through myth and possibility, and the middle ground moves between both. This dynamic creates a narrative that continues to evolve as new information emerges. Each perspective contributes to understanding the continent's role in ancient history. Skeptics refine the geological context, believers highlight mythological connections, and the middle group synthesizes diverse viewpoints. Together, they expand the conversation, shaping the next phase of exploration into what the presence of hidden formations beneath the ice might mean for humanity's earliest origins. The possibility that something lies beneath Antarctica's immense ice sheet carries implications that extend far beyond geology or ancient architecture. If the continent's hidden anomalies represent remnants of an early outpost, built by beings or civilizations predating known human history, the meaning of those structures would reach into every area of human understanding. It would influence how humanity interprets its origins, its early development, its myths, and its place in the sequence of life on Earth. The impact would not remain confined to archaeology or anthropology. It would affect the way society understands its past, its frameworks for knowledge, and its long-held assumptions about when true civilization began. Human origins are currently understood through a combination of fossil records, genetic studies, and archaeological evidence. These disciplines form a timeline that describes a gradual evolution from early hominins to modern humans. According to this timeline, complex societies emerged only in the last several thousand years. Civilizations capable of large-scale construction, written language, and advanced tools developed after long periods of slower growth. If the structures beneath Antarctica reveal activity from a much earlier period, the timeline would require revision. Human history would extend backward in ways previously considered improbable. One interpretation of such a discovery would involve the possibility that humanity interacted with a more advanced civilization in its early stages. These interactions could have taken the form of observation, guidance, or influence that shaped early human development. If this occurred, the myths describing early visitors or divine teachers might represent memories of these interactions rather than symbolic stories. The similarities found in ancient myths across distant cultures would gain new significance. Instead of separate traditions forming independently, they might reflect shared memories of encounters with groups who visited multiple regions of the world. Another implication involves the technological capabilities of early civilizations. If remnants of advanced structures exist beneath Antarctica, they demonstrate that some form of organized and skilled activity occurred long before the earliest recorded societies. This activity would challenge the assumption that humanity developed technology in isolation. Instead, it would suggest that human technological development may have been influenced by external examples. The presence of advanced structures in a prehistoric era would imply that knowledge and tools existed far earlier than previously thought. The impact extends to the understanding of global myths involving floods, lost lands, or sudden climatic changes. If structures lie buried beneath Antarctica, they would have been constructed during a period when the continent had a warm environment. As the climate cooled and the ice expanded, these structures would have been swallowed by the frozen landscape. This transformation matches the themes found in many ancient stories describing worlds lost to environmental shifts. These stories speak of lands that disappeared, civilizations that fell without leaving clear traces, and memories of earlier ages erased by nature. If the structures beneath the ice align with these stories, the myths may reflect historical events rather than pure imagination. Another area influenced by such a discovery would involve humanity's perception of its uniqueness. Humans often consider themselves the first species on Earth to develop complex tools, organize societies, and large-scale architecture. If another civilization existed before humanity reached that level, human uniqueness would require redefinition. Human development would be seen as one part of a broader pattern, rather than a singular event. The presence of earlier builders does not diminish human achievement, but it positions it within a larger sequence. Humanity would no longer exist at the start of the story, but would become part of a continuing narrative that extends into deep time. A discovery beneath the ice would also influence how science interprets evidence from other ancient sites. Structures in South America, the Middle East, or Asia that appear older than traditional timelines allow would gain new context. These sites contain large stones, advanced construction methods, and astronomical alignments suggesting knowledge beyond what early humans are presumed to have possessed. If Antarctica contains even older structures, the global pattern of early human sophistication might reflect exposure to advanced examples rather than independent invention. The archaeological record would require reinterpretation. Sites that appear anomalously advanced for their age would no longer stand apart as exceptions. Instead, they might represent echoes of an earlier period influenced by a civilization whose traces remain hidden under Antarctic ice. The meaning of such a discovery extends into human cultural origins as well. Myths, legends, and oral histories contain recurring themes describing beings who arrived in distant times, built large structures, shaped the environment, and departed. These stories appear in Mesopotamia, Egypt, Central America, Australia, and other regions. The consistency among these accounts suggests a shared memory. If Antarctica contains remnants of an advanced civilization, the stories may preserve details of interactions with these early builders. What appears symbolic might represent condensed memories of real events. This connection bridges the gap between mythology and archaeology. The genetic history of humanity could also be influenced by such a discovery. Genetic evidence traces human origins to small early populations that expanded over time. This expansion follows patterns of migration across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. A discovery beneath Antarctica may not alter genetic data directly, but it could reinterpret the context in which early populations developed. The presence of advanced groups interacting with or observing early humans could explain sudden leaps in cultural development, early astronomical knowledge, or unexpected levels of organization in ancient societies. Human genetics would remain consistent, but the cultural environment in which early humans developed would change significantly. The presence of structures beneath the ice would also influence interpretations of early maps that depict Antarctica without ice. These maps have long puzzled researchers because they appear to show the continent's true coastline before it became frozen. If ancient civilizations operated there, they may have mapped or travelled the region, preserving this information long before modern explorers discovered it. The maps would become evidence that humanity once possessed knowledge of Antarctica's earlier environment. The idea that this knowledge persisted through civilizations despite the disappearance of the original outposts gains credibility in light of such a discovery. The implications extend into environmental history as well. Antarctica's transformation from a warm continent to a frozen desert represents one of Earth's major climatic shifts. A discovery beneath the ice would provide direct evidence of human or pre-human activity during a warm period. This would enrich scientific understanding of Earth's climate cycles, the speed of glaciation, and the impact of global temperature changes. Structures built during a warm era and preserved under ice would become markers of environmental transitions. They would provide fixed points for calibrating geological timelines. This data could improve models for predicting future climate change by offering concrete examples of past transitions. Beyond academic implications, such a discovery would influence how societies perceive their collective history. The narrative of human progress would shift from a steady climb to a more complex trajectory involving interactions with earlier groups. The idea that humanity may have inherited traces of knowledge from a forgotten civilization alters how people understand their own origins. The sense of isolation that sometimes accompanies discussions of early human development would be replaced by a sense of connection to deeper, older histories. Human identity would become part of a broader story stretching into the ancient past. The discovery would also affect technological optimism and curiosity. If evidence of advanced structures lies beneath Antarctica, It suggests that technological achievement is not limited to recent history. Earlier civilizations may have reached high levels of development only to disappear due to environmental changes. This possibility influences how humanity thinks about its own resilience. Technological progress does not guarantee permanence. Civilizations rise and fall depending on environmental conditions. The structures beneath Antarctica would stand as reminders of both capability and vulnerability. The impact on education, research, and public interest would be significant. Schools would teach a different version of early history. Museums would reinterpret ancient artifacts in the context of interactions with earlier civilizations. Research institutions would expand programs dedicated to understanding pre-human history and deep-time archaeology. Public interest would grow as new narratives about early origins emerge. The mystery of Antarctica's hidden structures would inspire exploration, documentaries, and global attention. Another implication involves the relationship between science and myth. Science often views myth as symbolic or metaphorical, while myth preserves cultural interpretations of ancient events. A discovery beneath the ice would narrow the gap between the two. Myths describing early visitors, lost lands, and environmental transformations would gain historical grounding. Science would need to engage with these stories as potential sources of information about early periods. Myths would shift from purely cultural artifacts to historical clues that complement geological and archaeological evidence. The reinterpretation of human origins would influence how humanity approaches the unknown. Previously, many unexplained aspects of early history were attributed to lack of evidence or assumed to be symbolic. A discovery beneath Antarctica would demonstrate that ancient mysteries can reflect real events waiting to be uncovered. This possibility encourages deeper exploration into other unresolved areas of early history. It reinforces the idea that knowledge lost to time can re-emerge when conditions allow. The presence of early structures beneath Antarctica would also affect how humanity views its own potential future. The disappearance of an advanced civilization beneath ice serves as a reminder of environmental fragility. It illustrates how entire worlds can vanish due to climatic shifts. This perspective encourages humility. It encourages a broader understanding of how civilizations fit within Earth's long cycles. It highlights the importance of preserving knowledge, adapting to environmental changes, and preparing for the long-term survival of human society. A discovery beneath the ice would reshape geopolitical interest in the continent. Nations already involved in Antarctic research would intensify their efforts. International agreements governing the continent's use would face revision as new areas of importance emerge. Ensuring preservation of ancient sites would become a priority. Debates over access, excavation, and interpretation would arise. Scientific organizations would call for responsible study to avoid damaging fragile remains. The world would look to Antarctica not only as a place of scientific interest, but as a repository of ancient history. The discovery would also influence discussions about humanity's place in the cosmos. If evidence suggests that earlier civilizations originated beyond Earth, or possessed knowledge far exceeding early human capabilities, humanity would rethink its role in the broader universe. Such a shift would not depend on extraterrestrial origins alone. Even the existence of an advanced terrestrial civilization predating known history would expand humanity's understanding of its own potential and the cycles of knowledge that shape the world. These implications extend far beyond the scientific community. They reach into culture, identity, governance, and philosophy. The structures beneath Antarctica, if they exist, would represent a connection to a world older than recorded history. They would serve as reminders that the past contains layers still hidden beneath ice, stone, and sediment. The continent's frozen depths would become a gateway to understanding humanity's earliest beginnings and the forces that shaped them. As exploration continues, the meaning of what lies beneath the ice leads directly into the final step of this journey. It brings attention to the feelings of wonder, hesitation, anticipation, and quiet curiosity that accompany mysteries preserved in the coldest place on Earth. Antarctica carries a stillness unmatched by any other place on Earth. Its silence extends across distances so vast that even the wind feels restrained, moving quietly across ice that has settled into its position for millions of years. This stillness provides a setting where mysteries can remain preserved in ways impossible elsewhere. The continent's deep cold slows processes that would erase the past in other environments. It protects shapes, structures, and remnants of earlier worlds beneath a surface that appears untouched. This preservation creates a sense that Antarctica holds knowledge older than recorded history, as though the deepest layers of ice contain memories suspended in time. The quiet atmosphere surrounding the continent influences how people interpret it. Antarctica does not display its secrets openly. It does not offer ruins above ground or markings along its coasts. Its surface reveals only snow, ice, and rock, creating a landscape where hidden elements gain strength through absence. The lack of visible evidence encourages consideration of what might lie below the frozen crust. This absence invites curiosity. It allows theories and interpretations to grow around the anomalies detected by radar and satellite scans. The continent's silence becomes a canvas upon which ideas about the past can take shape without immediate contradiction. The extreme conditions responsible for this silence also explain why remnants of early activity, if they exist, remain intact. The continent serves as both vault and barrier. Ice protects what lies beneath, but it also restricts access. The physical difficulty of reaching deeper layers ensures that whatever rests there stays undisturbed. The ice becomes a guardian of time, holding ancient landscapes, buried formations, and possible structures in a state of suspension. Even as scientific tools improve, the ice resists yielding its contents fully. It provides glimpses but not clarity, outlines but not certainty. This resistance shapes how researchers, theorists, and explorers speak about Antarctica. Discussions often reflect the continent's quiet nature. Words remain measured. Interpretations unfold slowly. Evidence emerges in fragments. The presence of anomalies beneath the ice encourages patience rather than immediate conclusions. As the continent reveals only small portions of its hidden landscape, those who study it adapt to the pace set by the environment itself. The slow movement of ice, the faint reflections in radar scans, and the minimal changes visible on the surface reflect a rhythm that influences thinking. The continent seems to ask for time, not through spoken language but through the stillness it maintains. Antarctica's remote location contributes to this sense of quiet wonder. Few people travel there, and even fewer remain long enough to observe subtle changes. Research stations offer glimpses into the environment, but they capture only a small part of the continent's immensity. Outside these stations, vast expanses stretch without interruption. This remoteness reinforces the idea that Antarctica exists apart from human experience. It feels like a different world, one that holds stories older than civilization. The isolation provides an ideal setting for mysteries to endure without intrusion. The lack of human presence ensures that whatever lies beneath the ice remains as it was when the freezing process began. The continent's cold strengthens this effect. Temperatures drop to levels where most forms of life cannot survive outside protected areas. These temperatures slow decay, inhibit erosion, and preserve structures that would collapse elsewhere. Ice shields objects from oxygen, moisture, and biological activity. This environment prevents the slow transformations that reshape materials in more temperate regions. As a result, Antarctica becomes a repository for the distant past. Landforms, sediments, and potential structures are preserved with an accuracy difficult to match in any other environment. The cold becomes a stabilizing force, maintaining the shape of the buried landscape even as global climates rise and fall. This preservation adds weight to the anomalies detected in radar scans. When geometric outlines, dome shapes, long corridors, or rectangular formations appear in imaging data, Their persistence suggests that the continent has maintained those forms through cycles of ice movement. The cold protects them from erosion, while the immense mass of the ice sheet prevents external forces from damaging them. Their presence in multiple data sets across decades reflects the stability provided by the environment. Antarctica becomes a place where the past cannot easily escape the present, where remnants remain anchored in frozen layers. The continent's silence influences how myths and scientific evidence intersect. Mythological references to distant lands, ancient visitors, or early structures gain new relevance when viewed alongside geological and radar data. The quiet nature of Antarctica allows these stories to linger without contradiction. There are no visible ruins to disprove them, nor are there open structures to confirm them. The continent exists in a state between revelation and concealment. Myths take root in this space, supported by the anomalies that appear in scientific scans. The absence of direct evidence neither confirms nor denies ancient stories, creating room for interpretation. Antarctica's environment also affects how people imagine the continent. Its frozen landscape inspires a sense of wonder, not found in regions with visible structures or clear evidence of past civilizations. The absence encourages imagination. The silence fosters contemplation. People reflect on what might lie beneath a surface untouched by human history. The vastness of the ice sheet stretching across land once warm and forested creates a setting where ancient activity becomes plausible. The continent's unique characteristics support narratives that combine science, myth, and curiosity without contradiction. The idea that something significant lies beneath the ice encourages a broader understanding of how Earth holds its history. Not all evidence remains visible. Some rest beneath layers of preserved landscapes awaiting discovery. Antarctica exemplifies this. It contains remnants of lost rivers, ancient forests, and mountains unseen by human eyes. These features are real, confirmed by geological studies. If natural elements survive beneath the ice, the possibility of earlier structures surviving becomes reasonable. The same environment that preserves ancient rivers could preserve constructions built during warm periods before glaciation. The continent's glacial processes contribute to its ability to shelter the past. Ice forms gradually, layer by layer. This process allows structures or natural formations to remain intact beneath the initial snowfall. As the layers build, they compress and harden, reinforcing preservation. Over time, ice thickens to immense depths, sealing whatever lies beneath in near-perfect isolation. The ice sheet becomes a vast archive. Each layer contains traces of the climate during which it formed. Deeper layers correspond to older periods, offering a timeline encapsulated in frozen strata. Whatever existed on the continent before glaciation remains stored within this archive. As scientific tools improve, this archive becomes increasingly accessible. Radar systems penetrate deeper, revealing more detail. Satellites detect subtle surface shifts caused by objects below. Thermal imaging highlights warm regions beneath the ice, signaling geothermal activity or other sources of heat. Seismic studies track vibrations passing through rock and ice, detecting densities that differ from expected geological formations. These tools create a growing body of evidence indicating that the continent's hidden landscape contains anomalies that challenge established assumptions. Yet the ice continues to conceal the full picture. This concealment maintains the sense of mystery surrounding Antarctica. The continent reveals enough to stimulate interest, but not enough to provide clarity. The anomalies remain out of reach, protected by frozen layers too thick to drill through in most regions. This inaccessibility reinforces the idea that the continent holds secrets waiting for the right conditions to emerge. It creates a sense of anticipation, as though the ice sheet stands between the present and a deeper understanding of the past. This atmosphere mirrors how humanity often approaches the unknown. Some phenomena remain hidden until the appropriate tools or conditions bring them into view. Antarctica represents this dynamic on a continental scale. Its invisible landscape encourages exploration and speculation. It invites research that spans multiple disciplines, combining geology, archaeology, mythology, physics, and climatology. The convergence of these fields reflects the continent's complexity. Each perspective contributes a piece of the story, reinforcing the quiet wonder surrounding the environment. Antarctica's landscape also demonstrates how nature selects locations for preserving mysteries. Many environments erase evidence quickly. Wind scours dunes, rain dissolves structures, vegetation engulfs landscapes, oceans reclaim coastlines, only in places where natural forces slow does the past endure. Antarctica occupies an extreme position on this spectrum. Its cold prevents decay. Its isolation prevents intrusion. Its ice preserves shapes, with stability unmatched anywhere else on Earth. If a mystery required protection, Antarctica would provide it. This idea resonates with the concept that some mysteries choose their environments. Antarctica would serve as an ideal resting place for remnants of early activity. Its vastness reduces the chance of accidental discovery. Its climate limits exploration. Its ice ensures preservation. Anything hidden beneath the frozen surface remains protected across geological timescales. The continent becomes a safe harbour for the distant past, allowing remnants of ancient worlds to endure while other evidence disappears from the planet's surface. Antarctica's atmosphere influences how researchers approach their work. Scientists studying the continent frequently describe a sense of reverence for the environment. They recognise the significance of working in a place where the past remains preserved with such precision. This reverence influences their attitudes toward the anomalies. Skeptical researchers acknowledge that the continent contains surprises. Believers appreciate the environment's capacity to hide structures. The middle ground recognises that the truth may involve elements of both perspectives. The quiet nature of Antarctica affects all who study it, encouraging humility and patience. The continent's silence extends into the interpretation of scientific data. When radar scans reveal unexpected shapes, the silence amplifies their impact. The lack of surface evidence turns each anomaly into a focal point. Researchers analyse these shapes carefully, aware that small signals can lead to large insights. The environment encourages detailed observation. It reinforces the idea that even minor anomalies can reflect significant underlying features. This careful attention supports the persistence of theories involving ancient outposts or early activity. Antarctica becomes a place where the mind can stretch into deep time. Its frozen layers reflect ages that span millions of years. Standing on its surface offers a physical connection to periods far older than any human civilization. This sense of deep time influences how people reflect on the planet's history. The idea that structures predating humanity might lie beneath the ice seems more plausible when surrounded by an environment that has endured so long without change. The continent offers a setting where ancient origins, earlier civilizations, or forgotten activity fit naturally into the landscape. The quiet wonder surrounding Antarctica stems from its ability to maintain mystery without contradiction. It does not reveal enough to dismiss ancient theories, nor does it conceal so completely that all speculation becomes unfounded. It balances between what is visible and what remains hidden. This balance allows interpretations to evolve as new data emerges. The continent encourages ongoing exploration, not through dramatic displays, but through gentle hints that something significant lies beneath the surface. This sense of anticipation grows with each new scan. When updated radar reveals clearer outlines, imagination expands alongside scientific interpretation. When thermal imaging highlights unusual heat sources, interest intensifies. When gravitational maps show dense masses beneath the ice, theories expand. Antarctica responds to human curiosity with measured offerings, providing enough detail to sustain interest while maintaining the mystery that defines its character. The continent's quiet wonder also affects how people think before sleep. Its slow rhythms, still landscapes, and ancient time frames influence the mind during moments of rest. The idea of mysteries preserved beneath ice encourages reflection on the world's hidden layers. These thoughts settle gently, carried by the steady pacing of Antarctica's environment. The continent becomes part of the mental landscape, a place where hidden stories rest without urgency. It provides a setting where the mind can wander without fear or tension, exploring possibilities anchored in the Earth's most stable environment. The stillness that defines Antarctica creates a natural space for the past to remain present. It holds ancient worlds beneath its surface, protected from erosion and untouched by modern life. The environment allows remnants of earlier eras to persist without disruption. This persistence gives the continent a unique role in humanity's understanding of itself. It becomes a bridge between ages, linking the present to periods long before recorded history. As the journey through this landscape continues, the quiet wonder settles into the space between discovery and possibility. Antarctica remains a place where mysteries rest in silence, preserved beneath frozen layers that hold the shape of worlds long vanished, waiting patiently as new eyes and new tools draw closer to understanding what sleeps beneath the coldest place on Earth.